Chapter 591. Zhou Huang's golden boat could also fly, but its speed was far inferior to him. After sitting in the cabin for a short while, he felt the boat suddenly tremble, and then it stopped, as if it was grabbed by an invisible force. He immediately understood that he was trapped by Feng Haiyang's heaven and earth sealing technique. He was already prepared for this since a long time ago. He grunted as he grabbed the talisman in his hand and shook it, causing the restrictions on the boat to suddenly emit circle after circle of treasured lights that reflected each other with the bright golden boat, and it instantly illuminated the sky. The tribulation water in the sky rippled and arrived in front of the boat. It circled around the golden boat as if it was carefully observing it. After confirming that there was no danger, the jet-black tide rushed down with a hua-hua sound. With a rumbling sound, it was like a tornado rolling over and over, wrapping up the entire boat. Zhou Huang, who was inside the boat, felt a cracking sound coming from the cabin. It was as if there was an infinite amount of force pressing on the boat. He could feel that the seal was under great pressure. The light was flickering and flickering. What a strong spiritual energy! Zhou Huang was shocked. He thought that Feng Haiyang had achieved the third level of Dan, but he could not increase his spiritual energy by that much. With his seal, Zhou Huang was not afraid of him. However, it seemed that Feng Haiyang was someone who had achieved the second level of Dan. His spiritual energy was so strong that it was much stronger than Zhou Huang thought. The speed at which it eroded the seal was also very fast. If Zhou Huang did not pay attention to it, it would not take more than an hour for the seal to break in. However, even though he was being suppressed, he still let out a sigh of relief. It was not that the prohibition was unbreakable. Those who had studied arrays for many years could break the prohibition with array flags. However, at that moment, Feng Haiyang was only using his spiritual power to attack. This meant that he was not proficient in this. Otherwise, he would have used it a long time ago. Zhou Huang calmed himself down and changed his breathing. He forced out a drop of blood from his fingertip and dripped it on the talisman. She chanted the incantation in her mouth, activating her mana to restrict him from using it. The splendor that was originally scattered like wisps of light condensed into talismans, which were tossed out and pushed the tribulation water away a little bit. After a while, he noticed that his spiritual energy had decreased. Without continuing to exert any more strength, he picked up the pill bottle on the table and poured out a pill. After swallowing it, he closed his eyes and adjusted his breathing. After 100 breaths, he completely absorbed it. He opened his eyes and looked around. Seeing that there was no longer any support from him, at this moment, the other party was already reaching for a yard after taking an inch, forcing the restriction back. The restriction treasure light that was originally more than 30 feet wide was now only half of it, and it was still shrinking. He hurriedly shouted and once again poured his Fa Li into the talisman. In the blink of an eye, the restriction returned to its original state. He cast a few glances outside, a hint of mockery in his eyes. Although his skills were not as good as Feng Hai's, the heaven and earth lock technique had also consumed a lot of energy. Feng Hai's condition was not much better than his own. The only difference was that because he was inside the golden ship's prohibition, he could still find a way to circulate the medicinal power of the pill after taking it. He could maintain his transcendence energy at any time and place. If Feng Haiyang did not retreat after 4 to 6 hours, he would definitely be exhausted. At that time, it would be much easier for him to fight back or find an opportunity to escape. It seemed like Zhou Huang was being suppressed, but in reality, he was the one who chose how to fight. He had even thought of a way to retreat. It was because he was very organized. Outside the golden boat, Feng Haiyang's figure slowly emerged from the calamity water. He looked at the restrictive spell and pondered for a moment. Then, he formed a hand seal and the power of the calamity water beside him suddenly increased. Wave after wave of water rushed up, and every time it collided with the golden boat, it would shake incessantly. It was as if the boat would be tossed and turned along with the vast and mighty waves in the next moment. When Zhou Huang saw this, he desperately used the talisman to stabilize the golden boat. After a while, the shaking slowed down a little. He quickly took the opportunity and swallowed another pill. After Feng Haiyang used his Fa Li a few times, he nodded and formed a spell. He muttered something and immediately, a 30 feet tall devil appeared out of thin air. One could see the slyness in its face. This object could only be refined from the illusory myriad spirit in tribulation water, after reaching the third stage. This one was given to him by his master, and he could use it like a magic treasure. Its power was not small, and the two mounts of the Nye brothers had been injured by it. Originally, before he had broken through to the third stage realm, he was unable to display his full power. But now, it was different. He could make use of this item's special ability to change without a sound and sneak into the restriction, catching Zhou Huang off guard. Feng Haiyang had good eyesight. After a series of attacks, he had more or less figured out the details of the golden boat. Most of these restrictions were divided into Yin restriction and Yang restriction. The Yin restriction could break through formless essence qi, and the Yang restriction could block tangible objects. Just now when he tested it, he found that within a foot of the restriction, there would be a change every 3 breaths of time. In the innermost area, there should be a yin-yang restriction that was specially used to block Taoist techniques that could change between illusion and reality. He understood very well that the yin restriction and yang restriction were still manageable, but if he wanted to penetrate the last one in an instant, even though the demon could do it, it would definitely alert Zhou Huang. In that case, he would lose the effect of a sneak attack, and he would need to use several methods in tandem. With a flick of his sleeve, a square green stone hammer with edges and corners flew out. It was called the Great Yu Chisel, and it was forged by a few elders of the Netherspring sect. It was especially adept at breaking through restrictions and formations, and it could be used to deal with the golden ship at this moment. Just when he was about to make a move, he suddenly noticed a ray of light piercing down from the sky and shining down towards him, causing him to unconsciously frown. He'd seen this mirror light once not too long ago and knew he couldn't avoid it, so he grunted and raised the sun-washing mirror by his side to shine it up as well. He wanted to see who exactly was the person that had been investigating him time and time again. Who knew that when the two rays of light shone on each other, they actually disappeared? There was only light on the surface of the mirror and nothing could be seen. He was startled. After thinking for a while, a look of understanding appeared on his face. He muttered to himself, "What a good treasure." He was originally worried that other people from the Taoist sect would find out where he was and come to Zhou Huang's rescue. If that was the case, he would have no choice but to retreat first. But now, he had no more worries. He shouted and took out the Great Yu Chisel. He pointed it down. The treasure made a sound like a drum and turned its head, smashing down on the golden boat. When the golden boat was hit by the treasure, it was as if it had hit a mountain. A deafening sound exploded and the golden light scattered. The restrictions on the boat were instantly reduced by 1 or 2 hundredths. Zhou Huang was initially confident that if he continued like this, he would be able to escape successfully. However, when the sledgehammer came crashing down, his expression changed drastically. He picked up the talisman and shook it, trying to restore the seal. However, no matter how hard he tried, he could not restore it. His expression turned ugly and his heart sank. He thought to himself, could it be that the only way out is to retreat? But he was not willing to retreat just like that. The Jade Sky sect didn't obtain the slightest bit of benefit from coming to the sword duel this time, and they even lost a group of guardian elders and 2 elite disciples. If they were to return empty-handed, not to mention that they would surely be punished, those elders in the clan might not regard him as highly as they did in the past. Moreover, there were many people in the Zhou clan who were not satisfied with him coming to the sword duel. One could imagine how those people would hit him when he was down if they saw that he returned in failure. But if he did not leave, the treasure would be able to break the golden boat with another 100 or so attacks. At that time, he would lose his last support. Even if he still had 2 treasures on him, he would only be able to hold on for a while longer. It would be of no help to the overall situation. After the 2 thoughts battled in his mind, he finally felt that his own life was more important. He gritted his teeth and said, "Forget it. As long as I keep this body, I will still have a chance in the future. He raised his hand and took out the talisman. Holding it in his palm, he lightly tapped his teeth and chanted an incantation. After a few breaths, he felt that all the spiritual energy in his body was sucked out by the talisman. Not only that, there was not an ounce of strength left in his body. He could no longer sit still and fell to the ground. The talisman shook slightly and floated in the air. It started to float in the cabin. Zhou Huang did not know why, but he felt a strong sense of uneasiness. But since things had come to this, he could only hope that the talisman would be activated quickly and bring him out of this place. After Feng Haiyang used the Great Yu Spine dozens of times, he saw that there was no reaction from the golden boat. It was as if he was free to attack. He knew that the time had come. With a thought, the demon that had been waiting beside him for a long time let out a creepy laugh. Its body shook and it entered the golden boat. After the demon entered, every time it encountered the Yin seal, it would turn into a solid body. Every time it encountered the Yang seal, it would turn into a formless body. The last layer was the Yin and Yang seal. It could not be broken through just by changing. Feng Haiyang roared and took advantage of the fact that the power of the seal had weakened after the Great Yu Spine hit the golden boat. Feng Haiyang charged in and broke through the seal. Zhou Huang's spiritual energy was depleted and he could no longer fight back. He suddenly heard a strange sound and turned his head with difficulty. He saw a demon coming in from the outside and he couldn't help but shiver. The devil's eyes turned and met Zhou Huang's gaze. A sinister smile appeared on the devil's face, scaring Zhou Huang so much that he was scared out of his wits. With a loud shout, a cloud of smoke rose from his Taoist robe and wrapped around his body. This Taoist robe was also a Xian-level weapon. However, without spiritual energy, the cloud of smoke was only slightly thinner. The demon let out a creepy laugh. It swayed its body and pounced on Zhou Huang. It opened its mouth and bit down. There was a crack and half of Zhou Huang's head was taken off. It then sucked the primordial spirit into its body. Just as it wanted to chew on the rest of the body, the talisman that was hanging at the sides suddenly shone. In a flash, it wrapped around the headless body and flew up. With a loud bang, it smashed the golden boat into pieces and rushed out. When Feng Haiyang saw this ray of light rushing out with unstoppable momentum, his expression turned cold and he hurriedly dodged to the side. Even though he wasn't affected by the ray of light, the surging wave of qi still nearly injured him. When he stabilized his body and looked again, there was no trace of the ray of light. He felt that it was a pity. Zhou Huang was a disciple of the Yuxiao school who came for the duel. He might have some powerful talisman on him. If Feng Haiyang could stay, he would have a higher chance of getting the rest of the talisman. Chapter 592. In the Chengyuan Gorge, a ray of light descended from the sky. When the elders of the various sects saw that the light was actually descending towards Jade Sky Sect's mountain peak, they were all indescribably astonished. The two elders of the Jade Sky Sect were originally meditating, yet when they saw this unusual situation, they simultaneously opened their eyes and stood up to look over. The golden light fell to the ground in a flash, and after it dispersed, there was only a headless corpse on the ground. With just a glance at the attire, the expressions of the two of them instantly changed. One of the middle-aged Taoist nun walked forward with a gloomy face and swung the horsetail whisk in her hand. A star bead flew out from the corpse and floated in front of her like a firefly. She grabbed it and sighed, "Luckily we have the protection of our sect's secret arts, junior martial brother Zhou's primordial spirit is not lost." The other elder's expression relaxed slightly. Zhou Huang's position in the clan was not low. If his soul was destroyed here, they would not know how to explain it to him when they returned. The Taoist nun waved her hand and took Zhou Huang's sleeve. She then took out a talisman and looked at it carefully. She sighed, "Junior martial brother Xia is gone." The elder was speechless. This was within his expectations. Even Zhou Huang was dead, let alone Xia Keming, who was weaker in cultivation base and mana. The Taoist nun took out a golden box and opened it. A ray of white light shone on the corpse and kept it after a while. She said in a deep voice, Junior Marshal Brother, I want to bring Junior Marshal Brother Zhou's corpse back to the sect. What do you think? The elder looked at the few escaping lights that were flying over from the other peaks and said with a wry smile, the disciples of my Jade Heaven sect are all dead. If I stay here, could it be that I will become a joke to the other sects? I'll go with you and return to the sect. The Taoist nun sighed, all right. Having made up their minds, the two of them did not wait for the elders to arrive. They performed their escape arts and flew away. On raising Dan Peak, Ingye Daoren saw the two elders of Yuxiao school leaving and was surprised. He said, Senior Marshal Brother. What is the meaning of Yuxiao school? Elder Lu thought for a while and sighed, I think Yuxiao school must have failed like Nanhua and Tai Hao, otherwise they wouldn't have left in such a hurry. Ingye Daoren was taken aback. He thought that it was a disciple of the Yuxiao school who took back Jun Yang's spiritual essence, so he wanted to congratulate him. However, if what Elder Lu said was true, the situation in the Star Stone would be unpredictable. Thinking of this, his heart was also filled with worry. Elder Lu said slowly, Junior Apprentice Brother, you don't have to worry too much. Even without the Yuxiao school, there are still disciples from the Shaoqing, Qinsong, and Primal Yang sects in the Star Stone. The outcome is hard to predict, so there's no point in being anxious. Let's just wait patiently. At this moment, a wisp of yellow smoke came from the east at the western corner of the Star Stone. Then, it poured down, and slowly fell on top of a mountain peak. Lu Muqiu had been waiting for a long time. He stood up and cupped his fists, Senior Marshal Brother has killed Zhou Huang. Our generation has one less enemy. Feng Haiyang had a look of pity on his face. He shook his head and said, I still haven't done my best. Although he killed Zhou Huang, he found out that the primordial spirit that was absorbed by the devil was only a wisp of spiritual essence, and the owner had already escaped with the talisman. Lu Muqiu only thought that he was a disciple of the Xian sect that had not been eliminated. He smiled, I just now used my divine power to investigate. I saw that Shen Yinfeng from the Guangyuan sect was heading towards the middle road alone. He's only 500 to 600 miles away from here. Senior Marshal Brother, do you want to eliminate him? Feng Haiyang's expression changed. There were still many people left in the Xian sect, especially the disciples from the Shaoqing and Qinsong sects who were not injured at all. Their strength was still there. With the addition of the disciples from other sects, it was not easy to deal with them. If there was a chance to weaken them, of course, he would not let it go. After thinking for a while, he asked, Junior Marshal Brother Lu, do you know where Sun Huaying, Zhang Yan, and the others are now? Sun Huaying and Zhang Yan were experts in escaping techniques, so they were the biggest threat to him. He would not be afraid if he met either one of them, but if they appeared together, it was very likely that they would hold him back, and then he would be surrounded and attacked by all the disciples of the Xian sect. He had to be careful. Lu Muqiu replied, that Zhang Yan has a treasured mirror with him. He seems to be able to detect our traces. I could only watch from afar and did not dare to get too close. However, from what I can see, there are no traces of these two within 1,000 miles. Just now, he tried to use his divine power to investigate the movements of the disciples of the Xian sect, but he was almost hit by the light of the mirror. Fortunately, he realized it in time and moved the 10,000 miles ruler technique. Just now, he was able to escape from the disaster, but he was so scared that he broke out in a cold sweat. The divine power that he was proficient in could not be used in a head-on battle, so his combat power was far from that of his peers. If the people of the Xian sect found his hiding place, he would not be able to fight back. Zhang Yan also has a treasured mirror with him. Feng Haiyang's gaze froze. Only now did he know who was investigating him. He thought for a while and said, I will go and get rid of that Shen Yinfeng now. Junior Apprentice Brother, please keep an eye on him. If there are any changes, please inform me as soon as possible. Lu Muqiu quickly cupped his hands and said, I understand. Then, he sat down cross-legged and activated the 2 divine powers, the 1,000 miles alluring sound and the 9 nether candle. Seeing that he was ready, Feng Haiyang immediately activated the underworld escape technique and flew away. At this moment, he was using the Yuanying body to escape at an extremely fast speed. With the help of Lu Muqiu's divine power, there was no need to worry about losing him. After half an hour, he saw a middle-aged Taoist with a long beard flying on a talisman. It was Elder Shen of the Guangyuan sect. Feng Haiyang was very cautious. He did not go forward immediately. Instead, he shook his body and released hundreds of demons. Then, he took out the treasured mirror and shone it in all directions. After confirming that there were no abnormalities, he shouted and rushed forward. On the star stone path, Zhang Yan performed a hand sign and said, "If Feng Haiyang wants to take Brother Shen's life, he should have met him now. I can make a move now." He did not use the mirror to investigate. It would be easy to alert the enemy. He had already done it once, so he could not do it again. Therefore, he, Hu Xian and the others decided on a plan. Whether Feng Haiyang went to find Elder Shen or not, they would still act according to the plan. It would be best if they could bump into him, but if they did not, they would just have to make another trip. Hu Xian nodded and stood up from the rock. He cupped his hands and said, "All right. Junior apprentice Brother Zhang, you should be careful when you go to kill Lu Muqiu. I will go and get Elder Shen first. If we don't bump into Feng Haiyang, we will come and meet you as soon as possible." Zhang Yan raised his hand to return the gesture. He performed a hand sign and immediately, a ray of sword light flashed and flew away. Just now, he was using the sword to travel around. He roughly scanned the star stone path from top to bottom, east, south, and north, but he did not find any trace of Lu Muqiu. Therefore, he could conclude that this person was hiding in the west. If Feng Haiyang was not by this person's side, he could easily kill this person by relying on the bright moon mirror in his hand. If Feng Haiyang was with him, then it would not be a problem. He did not have to rush to challenge him to a battle. He could first follow the 2 of them and wait for Hu Xian and the others to meet up with Elder Shen and rush over to help. It would not be too late to make a move then. After flying for a while, Zhang Yan picked up the mirror and shone it in front of him. In an instant, a ray of light shot out. Everything that was illuminated was vivid in his eyes. After scanning for a while, he saw a figure in the mirror. He could not help but smile. At this moment, Lu Muqiu's face was as pale as a piece of paper. When Zhang Yan flew towards him, he already felt danger in his heart. He quickly used the heart-shadow synchronization technique to inform Feng Haiyang. However, the latter was fighting with Elder Shen. Even if he wanted to rush back, it would not be something that could be done in a moment. When he saw the mirror shining on him, he knew that something was wrong. In a panic, he used the teleportation divine art and disappeared in a flash. He had cultivated this divine art to a very high level. If he had the help of an artifact, he would not need to worry about flying hundreds of miles away. He would not be afraid of anyone chasing after him. However, the banner had already been destroyed by Hu Xian. Relying on his own transcendence energy, he could only travel 7 to 8 miles. Just now, when he found his footing on a peak, he felt a ray of mirror light falling on his head. It was as if a bucket of cold water had been poured on him. He could not help but shiver. Before he could think of a countermeasure, he saw a majestic ray of sword light coming down from the clouds. At this critical moment, Lu Muqiu shouted. His body exploded into a ball of black smoke. He let the ray of sword light pass through his body. He gave up a divine art and avoided the sword. Zhang Yan was slightly surprised. He did not want to get entangled with him. He shook his shoulder and the water element true light turned into a wave. In the blink of an eye, it engulfed the person. He used the technique and shook his sleeve. He floated down and sat cross-legged on the peak. After an hour, 7 rays of light with different colors came from the sky. It was Hu Xian and the others. Zhang Yan looked up and saw that Elder Shen was among them. However, he looked slightly dispirited. The group of 7 descended beside him. Huxian looked around and asked, "Junior brother Zhang, how was your trip?" Zhang Yan smiled and said, "Fortunately, I did not fail." Huxian's eyes were filled with joy. With this person gone, Feng Haiyang was the only devil doctrine disciple left. Yang Bai sighed, "Unfortunately, when we arrived, Feng Haiyang had already escaped. It seems like he did not come to Jinren Zhang's place." Zhong Muqing frowned. "Feng Haiyang did not come to junior brother Zhang. I think he has seen through our plan. It will be difficult to find him." Huxian waved his hand and said, "Then let's not bother about him. We will cultivate here and wait for him to come to us." As they were talking, they heard a whistling sound coming from above. They looked up and saw thousands of demons floating in the sky. They were dancing far away but did not come up. All of them were elites in Xianmen. They could tell Feng Haiyang's intention in an instant. He wanted to use the demons to disturb them so that they could not cultivate in peace. Huxian looked for a while and asked, "Junior brother Luo, can you set up a formation to block this thing?" Luo Qingyu thought for a while and said, "I only have instruments with me. It can block normal treasures but it is not enough to deal with demons that can pollute spiritual vigor." Huxian frowned and said, "Is there really no way to stop it?" Luo Qingyu thought for a while and said, "There is a plan. Previously, my senior brother took the 4 symbols mystic shuttle from Luo Canghai. We can try to set up the 4 symbols mystic formation. This formation is not afraid of evil spirits and can block the enemy outside the door." Zhong Muqing shook his head. "Although the 4 symbols mystic shuttle is owned by Qinsang School, you and I have not learned how to use it. How can we control it?" Luo Qingyu smiled. "Since I have suggested this, I have a solution." Chapter 593. The art of formation also depended on one's aptitude and talent. If one wanted to master it, it was no less than mastering several supernatural powers. Due to the many restrictions, there were not many people in Xianmen who were proficient in this art. However, Tao Zhenhong managed to escape from the Nanhua sect because of the formation. Luo Qingyu was one of the few top 10 disciples in Qinsang School who knew about the art of formation. Although he said that he had a way, he did not say it directly. Elder Shen stood up and saluted with his hands folded in front of his chest. He sighed and said, "My friends, Doran's primordial qi is just now his primordial qi is injured and he needs to recuperate. Forgive me for not being able to accompany you for the time being." After saying this, he got up and left. Looking at his actions, Yang Bai also realized that what Luo Qingyu wanted to say must be related to the internal affairs of the Luozang sect, and it should be inconvenient for outsiders to hear it. He coughed and said tactfully, "Fellow Taoists, I will go out with my wife to see if we can find the Junyang pot." He winked at Zhu Xian and rode a gust of wind to a peak in the distance. Sun Huaying did not say much. She smiled faintly and stood up. With a wave of her sword light, she was a few miles away and disappeared with a flash of light. The thousands of demons in the sky let out a shrill cry when they saw that several people had left. They also separated into groups. There were more than 100 of them and there were fewer than a dozen of them. They followed the people. After the few people left, Luo Qingyu said, "Senior brothers, junior brother Zhang, Luo Canghai's body has been destroyed, but there is still a trace of his primordial spirit left. We can try to force him to tell us the incantation. We don't need to be proficient in it, we just need to know the incantation." Zhong Muqing asked, "What if Luo Canghai is not willing to tell us?" Luo Qingyu said lightly, "I wanted to bring his primordial spirit back to the master, but this sword battle is more important. If he is not willing to tell us, he will be asking for trouble. Leave it to senior brother Zhong, you can use the soul-searching technique to investigate." Zhong Muqing thought for a while and nodded, "Okay." Zhang Yan glanced at Zhong Muqing. No wonder Luo Qingyu wanted to send the rest of them away. This was not just about Luo Canghai. The soul-searching skill was a taboo in the Xianmen sect. It would be bad for Zhong Muqing's reputation if it was spread out. But even so, This Tao technique was cultivated by all the sects, but because it was extremely difficult to cultivate, and there were many stringent requirements. Just like arrays, not everyone could master them. Huoxian looked at the sky and said in a deep voice, "Then let's do it this way. I'll deal with these demons first." Feng Haiyang and the other demons could not only be used to attack, but they could also be used as eyes and ears. Naturally, he did not want them to find out what they were planning. As soon as he finished speaking, he had already leaped into the air. The strong cloud above trembled, and a streak of golden fiery light appeared. It was incomparably hot, burning like a blazing sun, as if an underground fire was erupting. The golden wind blew and rushed up to the sky. A few demons could not dodge in time and were immediately turned into ashes. Even their essence was gone. The rest of the demons flew away with a bang. Zhang Yan pondered for a moment, then cast a spell from the secret book of billowing clouds. Clouds and smoke began to swirl around his body, and in less than the time it took for a stick of incense to burn, the area within a radius of 3 miles was covered by a thick layer of fog, making it impossible to see who was inside. Luo Qingyu looked around and saw that other than the area where the 3 of them were standing, the surroundings were filled with fog. Even Huoxian's figure could not be seen. Occasionally, the sound of the strong wind could be heard. He nodded and said, "Junior brother Zhang, this Tao technique must have been taught by Uncle Master's son, right? With this technique, it will not be easy for Feng Haiyang to find out who we are." Zhang Yan smiled and said, "It's just a small technique. It can only fool these low-level demons. If Feng Haiyang was here, he could easily break it with just a few bolts of Yin thunder." Zhong Muqing frowned and said, "Junior brother Luo, let's get down to business." Luo Qingyu smiled gently and took out a copper lamp from his sleeve. He pinched the knob of the lamp and recited a formula. Then, he pointed his finger at the lamp and said, "Luo Canghai." The copper lamp lit up and a green flame appeared. After a while, Luo Canghai's primordial spirit appeared from the flame. With the protection of the Yin fire, his body floated above the flame. He looked at the 3 of them and asked cautiously, "Luo Qingyu, what do you want?" Luo Qingyu said, "Nothing much. My brothers and I are facing a strong enemy. We just want to ask you to tell us the formula to control the 4 symbols' mysterious formation." Luo Canghai sneered, "What do I get from telling you?" Luo Qingyu said calmly, "You won't get anything out of it. My senior brother Zhong knows how to search one's soul. Even if you don't want to tell us, we will still be able to find out. But you will have to suffer a lot. I won't force you. You should think about it carefully." Hearing the name, soul-searching art, Luo Canghai's expression clearly revealed fear. If he was captured and brought back to Qinsang School, his primordial spirit might not be destroyed. But if the soul-searching technique was used on him, he would be an idiot even if he was reincarnated. He said after a moment of silence, "I'm willing to tell you." Half an hour later, Huoxianlai walked around the area within a radius of 3 miles and eliminated all of the devils. However, this could not solve the root of the problem. Zhou Haiyang only needed to use the tribulation water to refine thousands of devils. Without the protection of the formation, they would never be able to live in peace. At this moment, the clouds and mist below had already dispersed. He looked back and immediately flew away, returning to the peak. As soon as he landed, he asked, "How was it?" Luo Qingyu smiled, "Don't worry, senior brother. I got the formula." Huoxian relaxed a little and said, "Well done, junior brother. What do we need to do to set up the formation? What do you want us to do?" Luo Qingyu said, "The 4 symbols formation was originally controlled by Luo Canghai alone. He needed one person to control the 4 doors and 4 techniques. Now that the 4 disciples of Qinsang School are here, each of them can control 1 door. This way, the power of the formation will not be reduced and we can save a lot of time and effort." He then explained the formula to Huoxian. The 4 symbols profound formation could only be supported by the 4 profound shuttles. These 4 treasures were originally profound, and they could evolve to great power without relying on a complicated formation. As long as one understood the trick, they could use the chi of heaven and earth to preside over the formation. As for the more profound changes, although Luo Canghai knew about it, they still couldn't make use of it, so they had no intention to inquire about it. Refining the mystical shuttles needed someone to protect them, so they were not in a hurry. About 4 hours later, Elder Shen and the young couple returned one after another, but Sun Huaying was still nowhere to be seen. Huoxian secretly thought that the 3 of them were enough to guard the formation, so he took the initiative to explain the 4 symbols' mystical shuttles to the 4 of them. Finally, he said, when my brother and I are refining the mystical shuttles, we need someone to protect us and we cannot be disturbed. I will leave this matter to you. Yang Bai quickly returned the courtesy and said, you are too kind, Jinren Hua. With this formation, my wife and I can cultivate in peace. It is only right for us to contribute. Elder Shen also bowed and said, Jinren Hua is too kind. As we are all from the Xian men, this is I's duty. After the 4 of them came to an agreement, they went their separate ways. The young couple and Elder Shen soared into the sky and carefully guarded the surroundings to prevent the demons from invading. Zhang Yan retreated to the side alone and found a green rock to sit cross-legged on. He took out the white tiger mystical shuttle from his sleeve. Previously, he had refined this mystical weapon very crudely and did not put much effort into it. Otherwise, he would not have been unable to remove the filthy thoughts from Ding Kun's fatal sword. It was not that he was lazy, but that he could not completely refine this treasure without the proper method. Now that he had the true formula, he did not have so many obstacles. He activated the technique and extracted the metal qi from the 5 elements of qi essence. He stretched out his hand and pointed at the mystical shuttle. 3 days later, his whole body trembled. He opened his hand and a white tiger's shadow sprang out from the center of his palm. It was dozens of feet tall and roared at the sky. A sudden gust of wind blew, causing the grass and flowers to scatter and flutter chaotically in the air. The giant trees on the peak shook and creaked as if they were about to break. He activated the technique again and the white tiger crouched on the ground and slowly retreated into the shuttle. It was obviously tamed. He looked around and saw that Huoxian and the others were still refining with their eyes closed. He smiled and went to meditate. After an hour, the fiery red mystical shuttle in Huoxian's hand shook and a long cry was heard. The shadow of a vermilion bird with flaming feathers appeared. It only appeared for a moment and then disappeared. It was obvious that he used his mana to suppress it. He turned his head and saw that Zhang Yan had refined the mystical shuttle first. He nodded and said, among us, junior brother Zhang's mana is enough to be called the strongest. After another moment, Zhong Muqing and Luo Qingyu also completed their sacrificial refining. The young couple and Elder Shen saw that the 4 of them had finished their sacrificial refining. They circled around and then came down from the sky. Huoxian cupped his hands at the 3 of them and smiled. The 3 of you have worked hard. Did anything happen these few days? Yang Bai quickly returned the greeting and said, Feng Haiyang just sent some demons over. They were sent away by the 2 of us and Elder Shen a few miles away. It's just that. I haven't seen Jinren Sun these few days. We don't know where he went. At that moment, Feng Haiyang was sitting in the void 1,000 miles away. He was surrounded by thousands of demons. The catastrophe water under him was like a raging river. It started from the north and ended in the south. It was more than 30 miles long and had a great momentum. The 2 ends of the water were hidden in the void. After a short moment, he opened his eyes and flipped his hands. Swish! A 3 m tall devil emerged from within the illusory myriad spirit tribulation liquid. It had limbs and facial features, and its body flickered indeterminately like a candle. It seemed to be real yet ethereal, illusory yet real at the same time. Especially its eyes, there was a trace of cunning concealed within them. Feng Haiyang slowly exhaled and waved his sleeve. The demon let out a cry of dissatisfaction and sank back into the catastrophe water. After he reached the third stage of yuanying, he could refine another 3,000 demons. These demons were different from the ones he had before. Not only did they have their own intelligence, but they could also change between existence and non-existence. As long as the catastrophe water did not dry up, they would not die. It was like the demon that broke the seal on Zhou Huang's golden ship. However, that demon was given to him by his master. He did not refine it himself. Hence, he could not control it freely. This one, on the other hand, took him 3 days and 3 nights to nourish it in the catastrophe water. It was refined for himself. The star stone was full of spiritual qi. It was much better than his cave abode. Hence, he refined the demon very quickly. If he had enough time, he could refine dozens or hundreds of them. Then, he would be able to deal with the remaining 8 disciples in the celestial sect. If he could refine thousands of them, he was confident that he could easily defeat them. Chapter 594. In the blink of an eye, 3 months had passed. Feng Haiyang stared at the tribulation water in front of him. In the torrential turbid tide, there were more than 30 shadows of demons. They were like fish swimming in the stream, swaying back and forth. From time to time, there would be a rustling sound that lingered in his ears like whispers. In his plan, he would need at least 100 demons to have the confidence to fight with the disciples of Xianmen. These were far from enough. Just as he was about to cultivate again, he suddenly felt a violent tremor in his sleeve, as if the Junyang pot was jumping non-stop. He had no choice but to stop halfway and take out the treasured pot from his sleeve. When he held it in his hand, it was still struggling and trembling. It was as if it would fly away if he let go of it. He could not help but frown. The Junyang pot and the star stone were originally one. In this world, the spiritual vigor would rotate once every 108 days. At that time, the spiritual pot would move in the void and go somewhere else. He would need the talisman order to find it again. It seemed that because the time was approaching, the spiritual vigor on the pot had accumulated and was ready to move. Therefore, the movement was getting louder and louder. Once the treasure pot moved, it would be extremely difficult to find it again. He did not have absolute confidence. What worried him was that if the pot went to the other side of the star stone and happened to be found by the disciples of Xianmen, they would take Junyang's qi of essence. Then, all his hard work would be in vain. For the 6 demon sects, stopping Xianmen from taking Junyang's qi of essence was the most important thing in this mystical demon competition. The demon sects were in a prosperous state. If they could get the qi of essence, it would be the icing on the cake. However, if Xianmen could not get it, it would be one disaster after another. Therefore, even if the demon sects did not get anything, as long as they successfully stopped Xianmen, they would win this sword battle. After all, the demon sects had been suppressed by Xianmen for thousands of years. Their decline could not be reversed overnight. If they won the sword battle, it would have an extraordinary significance. For the disciples of the demon sects, it would have an inspiring effect. When Feng Haiyang returned to the sect, his reputation would increase greatly. He would be the first among his peers. Even those who had entered the 3rd stage of yuanying realm before him would not be able to compete with him. They would not be able to compete with him. In this way, he would be supported by the sect and become a cave in 100 years. It was not an extravagant hope. Comparing the yuanying realm and the manifestation realm, the difference could be said to be like the difference between the heavens and the earth. Once a cultivator stepped into the yuanying realm, they would transform from a chess piece to a player. So Feng Haiyang had long since secretly resolved that he would strive for this fortune no matter what. Thinking of this, his face showed a serious expression. He seemed to be calculating something important. After thinking seriously for a while, he finally made up his mind. He first put away the Junyang pot, then took out the second talisman from his sleeve pocket and shook it open. He gently guided the pot, and another ball of Junyang's energy was pulled out from the mouth of the pot. Feng Haiyang roared and channeled his mana. 33 demons flew out from the calamity water and hovered in midair. When they saw the ball of spiritual qi, their eyes filled with greed. They wanted to take a bite out of it, but Feng Hai didn't order them to. They didn't dare to approach it. They just kept circling around it. Feng Haiyang looked at the energy in his hand with pity. If this ball of Jun Yang's energy was obtained by a third stage of Yuanying realm cultivator, as long as the opportunity came, they could use it to enter the Grotto Heaven realm. Now, he was going to feed it to the demons. It was really an extravagant move. If the elders of the demon sects found out about this, they would probably punish him severely. However, the number of demons he refined was still not enough to fight against the Xian men. Therefore, he could only use this method to increase the power of the demons to make up for the shortcomings. As long as he defeated the Xian men, he could get more than 10 portions of Jun Yang's energy. However, if he did not win, even if he took it back, he might not be able to use it. Thinking of this, he was even more determined. He raised his hand and threw the energy out. When the demons saw this, they immediately swarmed over and tried to tear this ball of energy into pieces. However, this energy was strange. It could only be refined at once, and it could not be separated by Taoist spells or magic treasures. Therefore, after a long time, they could not tear even a strand of it. The 33 demons had their own intelligence. After circling around, they suddenly roared in unison. They suddenly combined their bodies and turned into one. They opened their mouths and sucked the ball of energy down. With a shrill cry, they threw it into the tribulation water. In just a moment, many inexplicable changes occurred. Their bodies seemed real and illusory, but now, they looked like a ball of clear qi. If one did not look closely, it would be hard to notice. Only then did Feng Haiyang feel happy. However, the kulpa water suddenly began to churn as if it was boiling. A powerful force rushed up and shook his chest. His expression changed, and he hurriedly used a spell to separate the demon heads. More than 20 of the demon heads suddenly exploded and floated away. It was obvious that they could not withstand the power of the essence qi. Feng Haiyang's expression became serious. He held his breath and focused. He tried to use his mana to help the remaining demons pass this stage. After 7 days, he finally stabilized the tribulation water and was no longer tortured by the energy. During this process, another 9 demons dissipated one after another. At this point, only 3 demons remained. He shook his head. The tribulation water spun, and the 30 demons that had exploded were refined again. However, they couldn't compare to the remaining 3 demons. He thought to himself, although it is not as good as I thought, with these 3 demons that have been nourished by Jun Yang's energy, I can still fight with the Xian men. While he was thinking, his arm suddenly shook. The Jun Yang kettle rushed out of his sleeve. It flashed for a moment and disappeared. Feng Haiyang laughed and stood up. With a shake of his body, he released more than 1,000 demon generals and ordered them to search for the Jun Yang treasured kettle. With the help of the demons, he had an advantage in finding the Jun Yang kettle. However, he could not guarantee that he would be lucky enough to find the Jun Yang kettle before the Xian men. Therefore, he could only fight with the disciples of the Xian men and take the initiative. It would be best if he could kill all the disciples of the celestial sect of wonders with just the 30 or so demons in his hands. If that was not possible, he had to stall the other party before the group of demons found the Jun Yang pot again. He let out a long roar, spread his sleeves, and activated his escape technique. He turned into a ball of surging yellow smoke and soared into the sky. On the Star Stone Road, the disciples of the Xian men who came for the sword duel were sitting on a high cliff. They were concentrating on controlling their qi and breathing spiritual vigor. Although the thousands of demons had not left, they could only stop outside because they were blocked by the formation. They could not come in and disturb the place. The spiritual qi here was obtained from the star stone outside the 9th heaven. Although after falling to the 2nd heaven, 80 to 90% of the spiritual qi had dissipated, it was still far better than a paradise. It was similar to the spirit cave in the Donghua continent. It was an excellent place to cultivate the mind. 1 year of cultivation here was equivalent to 10 years of cultivation in the outside world. After these days, everyone's cultivation had improved greatly. Zhang Yan sat cross-legged on a large green rock. At this moment, the cloud above his head had already condensed to the point of seeming material, and its glow was like a rainbow that glowed with 5 colors. Beside this cloud was another cloud that had already slowly condensed into form. However, it was still weak, and it seemed as if it would scatter with a gust of wind. It drifted indeterminately, and as it breathed in and out, this cloud revolved ceaselessly. At this moment, there was a sudden movement in the spiritual qi. He immediately felt it. His eyelids moved slightly. He opened his eyes and saw that a talisman that was originally floating in the air had burned and turned into ashes. This talisman was given by Elder Shen earlier. There was a spell on it. After 100 days, the talisman would burn and disturb the spiritual qi, waking everyone up from their meditation. Zhang Yan observed silently and noticed that 100 days had passed and his mana had increased by a little. He couldn't help but think to himself, what a pity, if I could get the help of the Qian Tian Jun Yang Essence Qi during my cultivation, I would definitely be able to get twice the result with half the effort and my advancement would be able to improve a little more. In the past, the cultivators who entered the Xian men could cultivate in peace because there was no demon sect to fight with them for the talisman. Those who were promised by their masters could even get some Jun Yang Essence Qi for their own use. Their cultivation improved even faster. But this sword duel was different because there were demon sect disciples watching from the side. Not only did they not have the Essence Qi to support them, they had to be vigilant at all times. Huoxian spat out a golden red light from his mouth. He then slowly retracted his qi dynamic and opened his eyes. Zhong Muqing and Luo Qingyu woke up one after another. When they looked over, they saw that the 2 clouds above Huoxian's head had turned from illusory to solid, and the 3rd cloud had a faint shadow. It was obvious that his cultivation had improved greatly. Among the top 10 disciples of the Qinsang school, Huoxian was the first one to enter the Yuanying state. He achieved nascent soul more than 60 years and his foundation was stable. If he could cultivate for another 1 or 2 years without any distractions, he would be able to step into the 2nd Yuanying state. Every time the star stone returned to the 2nd heaven, it would stay for 3 years. When the spiritual opportunity was activated, it would return to the outside of the 9th heaven. It would be enough if he could cultivate step by step. However, everyone knew that Feng Haiyang would not give them such a chance. After Huoxian retracted his qi dynamic, he looked around and saw that the young couple and Elder Shen had also retracted their cultivation. He said, everyone, it has been more than 100 days. The Jun Yang pot must have gone somewhere else. If Feng Haiyang wants to make a move, it will be within these few days. We need to be careful. Yang Bai's expression changed slightly. He asked, what if he doesn't come? Huoxian said, that's easy. Junior brother Zhang has the mirror with him. We can go and find the Jun Yang pot together. Yang Bai nodded. He suddenly thought of something and said, Jinren Sun has been alone for the past 100 days. I wonder how he is doing. Luo Qingyu smiled and said, although Jinren Sun does not have the protection of the formation, he has the sword pellet with him. He will give us a warning when there is danger. Moreover, the place where he cultivates is not far from us. Even if Feng Haiyang went to look for him, how would there be no movement? Since there is no news, he should be fine. Sun Huaying suddenly left that day. After that, he sent a letter back. He mentioned that the cultivation method in the sect was unique and needed another place to cultivate. Although he said it politely, everyone knew that this Shaoqing disciple was arrogant. He did not want to enter the 4 symbols profound formation to cultivate. He did not want to owe the Qinsang school a favor. They could not force him and could only let him be. While they were talking, Zhang Yan suddenly noticed something strange. He immediately turned his gaze and saw that a few miles to the west, there was a stream of black water falling from the sky with great momentum. But in the blink of an eye, another sword light soared up and glowed with a brilliance of 100 zhang in the air, fiercely slashing down. Chapter 595. Sun Huaying flew up on her sword, and with a flick of her sleeve, a sword mark flew out like a rainbow. It immediately tore apart a portion of the tribulation water that was rushing over. Within the mist that dispersed, 30 devils burst out with a bang and attacked various parts of his body. He shouted coldly and activated the supernatural power, so near, yet worlds apart. The sword light kept jumping within 1,000 feet, like a golden carp leaping over the waves, appearing and disappearing in a flash. Every strike of the sword accurately cut open the demon head. As long as it was cut open, the essence, qi, and spells within it would all collapse. After the last strike, the sword gleam suddenly flashed and retracted from its original position. It suddenly jumped out 150 feet away and sliced Feng Haiyang's head off. Then, the sword did not stop there. It spun 9 times and chopped off Feng Haiyang's torso and limbs. Then, the sword hummed as it turned into a ray of light and returned to Feng Haiyang's side. Seeing Feng Haiyang's body parts falling into the tribulation water, Sun Huaying's expression did not change. Just by looking at the tribulation water, he knew that he did not manage to kill Feng Haiyang. However, that wasn't his objective. He'd found out from the young couple that regardless of whether the body that had been slashed was real or fake, there would always be a gap after it was reborn. Moreover, he'd created a sufficient commotion with the first sword strike just now, in order to attract everyone's attention. This period of time would be sufficient for Huxian and the rest to rush over to help. As expected, the tribulation waters shook 100 feet away. When the sound of tide was heard, Feng Haiyang emerged from the water unscathed with his yellow robe wrapped around his body. Sun Huaying pinched the sword formula and tried to use the sword pill to sense. However, after some investigation, he felt that the qi dynamic was disturbed and it was hard to grasp. He could not tell whether the person standing in front of him was real or fake. He frowned. This was probably not only because Feng Haiyang's cultivation level was higher than his, but also because the illusionary tribulation water of 1,000 spirits was good at changing and it could cover his qi dynamic. That was why he could not see where the real body was. On the other side. Sensing that Feng Haiyang had arrived, Huxian and the rest immediately removed the 4 symbols formation and rode on the astral wind. Rushing over to help. Zhang Yan brandished his sword and flew into the air. He had always been cautious and did not rush forward. Instead, he circled around the area. He wanted to see if there were any strange arrangements. Sun Huaying was a Shaoqing disciple. Even a third-layer Yuanying cultivator like Feng Haiyang had to last a moment against her. It was definitely not a difficult task. However, the devil sect's methods were treacherous and he had to be on his guard. Especially when the thousands of devils had been wandering outside for more than 100 days. If there really was a trap left behind and he rushed in, not only would he not be able to save the people, he would also easily get himself into trouble. They were only a few miles away from Sun Huaying. They would arrive in the blink of an eye. Originally, Zhang Yan's speed was the fastest among them, but with such a delay, he fell behind. The first to arrive were the young couple. The couple used the gunmetal sword qi to fly, so their speed could be considered excellent. Even though they were not as fast as Zhang Yan and Sun Huaying, they were still faster than Huxian and the other 2. Now, with the help of the Dark Azure sect's disciples, their confidence was greatly boosted. Yang Bai also felt that this battle was related to Yuan Yang sect's reputation, and they couldn't afford to back off anymore. When he got close, he did not have the time to greet Sun Huaying. He let out a roar and drove the sword plate above him, causing a violent sword rain to erupt. His wife, Zhu Xian, had a telepathic connection with him. She could tell that he had used his full strength this time, so she did not hold back her magic power. She shouted and moved the sword plate, causing a waterfall of sword qi to spread out. They worked together and poured down like a tide. As a Shaoqing disciple, how could Sun Huaying miss such an opportunity? She immediately made a hand seal, and a sword light suddenly appeared 30 meters in front of Feng Haiyang, slashing horizontally. However, this time, a demon whose form could not be identified leaped out of the water of tribulation and collided head-on with the sword. With a clang, the sword pill was blocked. Sun Huaying could not help but raise his eyebrows, and a strange look appeared in his eyes. It was not because the sword did not cut through the devil, but because he was thinking that it was not normal for Feng Haiyang to use a devil to block the sword. Did that mean that this person's real body was the one before him? Feng Haiyang laughed out loud and waved his sleeves. More than 10 demons flew up to meet the young couple's sword chi. The 5 demons at the front suddenly turned incorporeal and passed through the sword chi without any hindrance. Then, the 5 demon heads collided with the sword chi with a shrill sound. However, a series of clanging sounds could be heard. The ferocious sword chi did not even manage to cut through a single demon head. They were all blocked. This round of attacks did not pose any threat to Feng Haiyang. Yang Bai and his wife could not help but be shocked. Although this sword chi was not their most incisive technique, it was easy for them to kill devils and filthy things with the thousands of sword lights. However, these 10 devils seemed to have something special about them. They were completely unharmed when they faced them head-on. However, there was no time for them to think too much about it. The 5 devils had already charged forward. Fortunately, perhaps due to the changes, their speed was not fast, so the husband and wife could deal with them easily. They made hand seals at the same time and spun the sword board. They no longer scattered the sword lights, but gathered them into 2 shining golden swords that hung above their heads. Because they could change between incorporeal and incorporeal, one of them used the Yang technique, while the other used the Yin technique. Then, they combined the 2 swords, shouted in unison, and pointed down with their fingers, killing the sword lights with all their might. The Yin technique and the Yang technique were used together, so no matter how the devils changed, they would be able to hit them. However, just as the sword lights were about to hit them, the 5 devils suddenly spread out and scurried away. They then turned in the air and went around the sword lights. Suddenly, their bodies became incorporeal and incorporeal, and they attacked where the 2 people were. Their speed was more than twice as fast as before. This sudden attack could be said to be completely unexpected. Yang Bai and his wife did not expect that these devils would deliberately pretend to be flying slowly. When they got close to the 2 people, they suddenly revealed their ferocious fangs. Originally, they would not have been so careless. It was just that Feng Haiyang was being held back by Sun Huaying. According to common sense, it was not very possible for him to split his attention to control his Dao technique to such a high level. Therefore, in this instant, an opening that should not have appeared. At the 3rd level of Calamity Water, the devils were completely different from before. Their flying speed was already similar to the Yellow Spring's escape art, and they could change back and forth between real and fake. However, this was not what made them powerful. Instead, they had their own intelligence, and they knew how to deal with their enemies. If the eye of Feng Haiyang refined all 3,000 devils and used it with the Heaven and Earth Seal technique, they would be able to kill the 2 people in one move. Just as the 2 people were in a panic, they suddenly saw 5 golden lights attack them. They accurately passed through the bodies of the 5 devils one by one. Then, there was a loud buzzing sound, and in an instant, the Yang fire was released, burning them to ashes, and the body of the spear with a coiling dragon attached to it appeared. Great Sun Dragon Sparrow Spear. Yang Bai and his wife were slightly dazed. When they looked back, they saw that Huxian and the others had also rushed over. At this moment, there was a loud bang below. It was Sun Huaying cutting Huxian in half at the waist again. However, when everyone saw that the calamity water did not disperse, they knew that Huxian was not really killed yet. Zhong Muqing looked at the calamity water that was like a raging river, and he made a thunder seal. He pointed down, and a ball of green-black lightning appeared in his hand. With a tearing sound, it tore a gap of 100 feet in the calamity water. However, to the black muddy water that was a few miles long, it could not shake its foundation. Even if it was dispersed, it could still gather again. He snorted and thought, if we want to get rid of this person, it seems like we have to refine this water. Huxian said in a deep voice, ignore his death substitution technique. With his mana alone, how can he fight against the 8 of us? Every time he comes out, we will kill him once. Let's see how much mana he has to fight against us." Everyone at the side agreed in their hearts. They had the advantage in numbers, so they had to make use of their advantage. Although Feng Haiyang's cultivation was high, he was only one person. No matter how strong his mana was, it was still limited. If they took turns to fight, they would still be able to exhaust him to death. Hu Xian could see clearly that the urgent matter at hand was not to think of a way to kill this person, but to think of a way to trap him so that he could not escape with his escape technique. He raised his hand and waved. Zhong and Luo immediately understood and chose a direction to fly. Yang Bai and his wife also saw through their intentions. They took a step forward, and a strong wind rose. Instead of advancing, they retreated to the side, wanting to seal off Feng Haiyang's path of retreat. Elder Shen was only one step faster than Zhang Yan. He looked around and saw that Hu Xian and the others were fighting for a position, so he did not want to steal the limelight. Instead, he intentionally or unintentionally moved closer to Zhang Yan's sword gleam that was flying in the sky. Feng Haiyang's body rose from the water of calamity. He raised his head and saw the movements of the people from Xianmen. He knew what they were planning. Even if his cultivation was higher than theirs, it would be bad if he was trapped. He did not want to sit and watch, so he clenched his fist and hammered on his chest. He shouted and spat out a 3 feet long white light. Yang Bai had seen this divine art before. When he was about to attack, he already felt that something was wrong. He shouted, "Everyone, quickly close your eyes." Hu Xian had heard from the young couple that Feng Haiyang had a divine ability that could enchant one's soul. He immediately closed his eyes to prevent his opponent from launching a sneak attack. He raised his right hand and summoned 6 great sun dragon sparrow spears into the sky. With a loud yell, he hurled them down. Luo Qingyu and Zhong Muqing did the same. To prevent any accidents, not only did they close their eyes, but they also blocked their mouths, noses, and ears with spiritual qi. At the same time, they activated their protective lights. Everyone present had just closed their eyes when they felt their bodies stiffen slightly, and then this feeling grew stronger and stronger, causing their hearts to shake. They understood that they'd fallen into the wind ocean's technique that sealed off the heavens and the earth, so all of them withdrew their magic treasures and took strict precautions, as they were deeply afraid that Qin Shi would come looking for them alone. Feng Haiyang did not plan to do that. Although this divine art was powerful, it consumed a lot of mana. Even if he could kill 1 or 2 people, it would not be worth it. Instead, he would be exhausted easily. He was confident that he could kill 1 person if he was alone. However, once he was surrounded, he would lose his biggest advantage. Therefore, he could only temporarily trap everyone and think of a way to escape from the battle. He could then take control of the rhythm of the battle. He waved his sleeves and turned into a yellow smoke. He flew into the sky. Because of his fast speed, he was able to get away in an instant. However, just as he arrived in the sky, he heard the sound of thunder in his ears. Dozens of purple lightning bolts fell from above and bombarded his body. Instantly, he exploded into pieces that filled the sky. Chapter 596. Just now, Zhang Yan was still outside of the battle. When the soul-dispersing 3 dispelling qi was released, he was quite far away, so it couldn't confuse him. Thus, he acted quickly. Dozens of purple cloud godly thunder were released, instantly blasting Feng Haiyang into dust. He stepped on the top of the cloud and looked around. He saw the tribulation water below was scattering in all directions, demonic energy was rising, and a large cloud of smoke was rising. In a flash, it actually spread out for several li. The scattered water suddenly condensed into a body, turning into thousands of demons, rushing out in a chaotic manner. He saw that there were many demons, so he wanted to use the water element true light to block them. However, just as he thought about it, he felt a sense of danger. He shouted and rode on a gust of wind to avoid it. Just as he dodged to the side, he saw a gloomy white light flash past him. He didn't know what kind of treasure it was. After the white light flew away, it disappeared in the air. However, he could feel that it was just hiding and didn't leave. It was as if it could pounce at any time. Zhang Yan didn't hear the young couple talk about this item. He immediately deduced that this was a technique that Feng Haiyang had never used in front of others. Since he hid it until now, it must be very powerful. He had to be careful. He thought for a while and released the star's sword ball. He used the sword eye to check the surroundings. At this time, thousands of demons had already rushed behind him, but he didn't even turn his head. He stood there and flicked his sleeve, and a huge wave rose to the sky. It was majestic and powerful, and with a sweep of his head, all of them were drowned in it. In the churning demonic clouds, a drop of water that looked like ink flew to the west. It quietly drew a half-arc and arrived 1,000 feet behind the young couple. In the blink of an eye, it turned into a stream of water. Feng Haiyang stepped out of the water. Without saying a word, he flicked his sleeve. With a loud bang, a huge ball of dark wind was shot out, and it spiraled wider and wider. In an instant, it covered a radius of a few miles. 9 Underworld's Great Sorrowful Wind. Yang Bai and his wife were terrified. They knew how powerful this divine art was. The Nye brothers' fate was right in front of them, so how could they dare to take it head-on? The power of this divine ability was immense, but it wasn't fast when it was used. If it was in the past, they would only need to use their escape technique to escape. However, the heaven and earth lock technique was still there, so it wasn't easy to escape. He could only escape at a much slower pace than before. However, Yang Baihun only walked a few hundred feet when he felt an inexplicable chill in his heart. With a loud shout, a golden light shot out from his palm and illuminated the path in front of him. Suddenly, a strange devil appeared in the originally empty space. If one did not notice the trace of viciousness in his eyes and bumped into him, they would definitely be ambushed. Zhu Xian waved her hand as if she was playing a pipa. Hundreds of strands of sword qi that were as thin as gossamer flew out, each and every one of them sharp and piercing, forcing the demon to continuously retreat. In the end, it let out an angry roar and suddenly turned around, disappearing without a trace. Zhu Xian didn't feel surprised. Just now, the sword qi that she shot out was not a normal sword qi, but a talisman known as the Silver Swords of Flux. When attacking the enemy, it could be hidden within the sword qi and shot out at the same time. The protective treasure light was like nothing in front of it. If it wasn't a profound level artifact, it would be broken upon contact. However, right now, it could only force the demon to retreat. It didn't seem to be damaged at all, so how could she not be shocked? At the moment, escaping was more important. The two of them didn't dare to advance toward the place where the demon hid. They hurriedly moved toward where the people from the Qinsung school were. They had already realized that under the heaven and earth lock technique, if they couldn't trap Feng Haiyang in time and allowed him to escape, it would be extremely easy for them to give him a chance to attack them one by one. The husband and wife had fought with him before, so they didn't have the confidence to fight against him. Moreover, there was the great sorrow wind of the 9 underworlds chasing after them. Right now, the only way out was to retreat. As long as they could hold on for a while and wait for Hu Xian and the others to come to their aid, they would be able to escape from danger. They didn't go far when a demon suddenly jumped out in front of them. The husband and wife saw that it was exactly the same as the one before, so they didn't want to be entangled by it. They turned their traveling light and turned left. A few breaths later, another demon appeared. It bared its teeth and showed its ferocious might in midair. The two of them turned pale and hastily changed their direction again. After traveling for a while, they heard a roar from the clouds. It was obvious that another demon was blocking their way. Yang Bai's eyes burned with anger, and he said, "I don't believe that all these demons are so powerful." He made a hand sign and summoned a colorful magic sword in the sky. With a shout, he controlled it to slash forward. The demon laughed strangely and fiercely welcomed the sword. With a clang, it actually knocked the magic sword to the side. The corner of Yang Bai's eyes twitched. At this moment, 5 out of the 4 directions were blocked. Helpless, they could only fly up into the sky where there were no demons. After flying for an arrow's throw, they suddenly saw the clouds in front of them disperse. A bolt of tribulation water rushed down from the sky and circled around the 2 of them. It instantly trapped them and separated them from the others. Yang Bai's face turned pale, and he exclaimed, "Not good. We've been tricked." He immediately realized that this should be a trap laid by Feng Haiyang. Just now, he was trying to force them to jump into it. However, after thinking about it again, he couldn't help but smile bitterly. Feng Haiyang was pressuring them with every move he made. Even if they knew that there was something fishy going on, they had no choice but to come here. He took a deep breath and said solemnly, "Madam, when that person shows up later, there's no need to hold back." Zhu Exan nodded silently. At this moment, they had to fight with their lives on the line. If she was Feng Haiyang, after spending so much effort to force them into this place, she wouldn't let them go. It was better to give up on the delusion and focus on fighting the enemy. She secretly channeled her Xian Qi and activated the fatal sword. Right now, this was the only Dao technique that could kill this person. Even if she had many misgivings, she couldn't care less at this moment. At this moment, there was a sudden fluctuation in the tribulation water. The 4 demons that they met just now broke out of the water and pounced at them in a ferocious manner. Both of their faces changed. It was hard enough to deal with 1 demon, let alone 4 at the same time. Zhu Exan gritted her teeth and took out a small copper bell from her pouch. She held it in her hand and lightly shook it, causing a clear jingle to ring out. When the 4 devils heard the sound, a bewildered look appeared in their eyes and they unexpectedly began to spin in place. However, every time the bell was shaken, the high cloud above her head dimmed a little. It was obvious that using this treasure was very taxing on one's vitality. Feng Haiyang frowned as he watched. After he made his move, he first sealed the heaven and earth, then he continuously used his supernatural power. Even though he had entered the 3rd realm, he still felt a little weak. However, if he could absorb the flesh and blood of the 2's primordial spirits, he would be able to recover quickly. Therefore, he was determined to succeed this time. He immediately appeared from the tribulation water and raised his hand as if he was going to use his supernatural power again. Yang Bai had been paying attention to the surroundings. When he saw Feng Haiyang's movement, he did not allow him to do so. This place was surrounded by the tribulation water, and if the 9 underworld's great sorrowful wind blew, where would they go to hide? His gaze turned sharp as he shouted, "Kill!" As soon as he spoke, Zhu Exan responded as well. 2 rays of light flew out from the center of the husband and wife's brows and shot out like lightning. Feng Haiyang's hands stopped in midair, and he stared at the 2 rays of sword light that were flying towards him. He knew how powerful this sword was. This sword might not be as fast as a flying sword, but it was condensed by the spirit qi. As long as it followed the spirit qi, it would be able to kill its enemies. None of the treasures he had could block it. Unless he could escape from this star rock, there was no way he could avoid it. However, this sword skill of the Yuan Yang sect was very famous. He had spent a lot of effort to set up this trap, and he had already expected this move. He had already thought of a way to deal with it. Therefore, he did not move at all. In the blink of an eye, the 2 rays of sword qi arrived in front of him. His eyes flickered, and he shouted in a low voice. He activated a secret technique and waved his hand twice, cutting out 2 strands of spirit qi. At the same time, 2 sparkling jade pearls flew out from his ancestral aperture. When the pearls touched the spirit qi, they turned into 2 clones that looked exactly the same as himself and flew towards the sword qi. With 2 swishing sounds, the 2 rays of sword qi immediately cut through the 2 spirit qi. However, the sword qi that was originally shining with 7 colors suddenly dimmed down. It struggled for a few feet, and after a slight tremble, it finally dissipated. Yang Bai and his wife's bodies trembled at the same time. Blood flowed out from their 7 orifices. The cloud above their heads fluttered, as if it was about to disperse. The life-slaying sword was always effective against people with lower cultivation base, but against cultivators with higher cultivation base, it depended on luck. Feng Haiyang didn't look good either. This time, he gave up 1/3 of his spirit chi and 2 Xian spirit crystal pearls that could resist divine powers. He took the risk of damaging his cultivation in the future to resist the sword chi head-on. However, he managed to break this Dao technique. Seeing that the two of them had lost the ability to fight back, he stood still at his original position. With a loud rumble, the tribulation water closed, and in an instant, the two of them were swept into it. With a slight twist, the two of them's physical body and primordial spirit were all turned into his own mana. His spirits were lifted again, and with a loud roar, he dashed out. This time, he was heading towards Elder Shen. Although it looked like he had spent a lot of effort to kill the young couple, his actions were actually very fast. From the beginning to the end, it only took 10 breaths. Even until now, he had not removed the heaven and earth lock technique. He was still preparing to take advantage of this opportunity to kill another person in one go. Not far away, he turned his gaze and noticed that there were 2 Taoists heading towards him. Upon closer inspection, he realized that it was Luo Qingyu and Zhong Muqing. Feng Haiyang had a change of mind. With a shake of his body, there was a loud rumble, and thousands of demons surged out and flew towards the two of them. Then, he waved his sleeves and continued to fly forward. Not long after, he heard the sound of thunder coming from behind him. He was not bothered by it. There were many demons, and with the heaven and earth lock technique binding them, the two of them could not use their escape techniques. Even if the thunder technique was powerful, it would not be able to disturb him for a while. Ever since the black smoke and demonic aura appeared in front of him, Elder Shen had been vigilant of his surroundings. Suddenly, the clouds in front of him parted, and Feng Haiyang was flying towards him aggressively. He was slightly shocked. He knew himself very well, so he did not have too many complicated thoughts. Without saying anything, he immediately slapped away the golden axis talisman, and it turned into a golden light that shot up to the sky to protect himself. Feng Haiyang smiled coldly. When he attacked previously, Daoren used this talisman to hold on until Huxian and the others came to help, forcing him to retreat. However, after fighting with him once, he could see the weakness of this talisman. He waved his sleeves, and the tribulation water surged up and circled around Elder Shen. It actually wrapped around the golden light, and with a turn of his mana, he actually escaped with it. Chapter 597. Feng Haiyang had just swallowed the young couple, so his magic power was still abundant. Due to the heaven and earth shackling divine art, even if he used the water of calamity to wrap around Elder Shen and fly away, his speed was still extremely fast. Nobody could catch up to him. Although Elder Shen had used the golden talisman to protect his body, he was still able to sense that under the pressure of the tribulation water, his magic power was disappearing rapidly. If no one came to help him, he would probably be the first to be exhausted to death in less than a moment. It was not that he had no way to get out. Zhou Huang's vast cloud in one breath could not trap him to death. As long as he activated the restriction of the golden earth axis talisman, he would be able to get out. However, he would lose his ability to fight for at least 2 hours. If no one came to help him, he would die. He stroked his beard and thought for a while. Then, he picked up the golden earth axis talisman, shouted and activated his mana. Suddenly, Feng Haiyang felt that the calamity water was shaking violently. There was a powerful force surging out and it was hard to suppress. Before he could react, he heard a loud bang and the calamity water collapsed. A golden ray pierced through the clouds like a pillar. Even the thick curtain of smoke and clouds in the sky was torn apart. Countless demons were crushed along the way. He was slightly taken aback and hurriedly retracted the tribulation water before summoning the devil head. When Zhang Yan heard the commotion, he turned around and saw the soaring golden light. He immediately recognized that it was Elder Shen's doing. After pondering for a moment, he formed an incantation gesture and was about to use his teleportation escape art. But at this moment, a pale white light suddenly flew out from the void and slashed at the back of his neck from 1,000 feet away. Just before this thing flew over, Zhang Yan's heart consciousness had already received a warning from the sword pellet. Thus, he didn't panic at all. His entire body suddenly turned into a stream of light and escaped. At the same time, a green firefly flew over at an incomparably fast speed. In the blink of an eye, the white light was frozen in the air. Zhang Yan stopped on the cloud and looked down. He then saw that it was a half-moon axe with a ghost head. There were blood marks on the blade, and its fangs were protruding. The sound it made was shocking. It was full of hostility. This axe was called the Dark Axe of Darkness. Not only was it extremely bloodthirsty, it even had the remnant soul of a devil sect elder sealed within it. Once it killed a person, it could absorb their blood essence and increase their power. Not only was it extremely difficult to control, it could even harm its owner. That was why Feng Haiyang had never used it before. However, ever since he entered the third stage of Yuanying, he had never used it. He was confident that he could suppress this thing, so he released it. The devil axe struggled a few times, but seeing that it couldn't break free, it suddenly trembled violently, turned into a white gas, and flew away. Then, it disappeared. Zhang Yan's eyes narrowed slightly. His longevity-locking sun cicada was a magical treasure, so it was rare for him to fail. However, this thing could break free, so it was definitely not an ordinary treasure. However, he had the star's sword pill with him. As long as this thing came out, he would know in advance, so there was nothing to be afraid of. He waved his sleeves and used the minor universe shifting technique. After a few teleportations, he arrived at the place where Shining and Feng Haiyang were fighting. The devil chi here had long dispersed. He looked down and immediately saw Feng Haiyang's figure. Without any hesitation, he rushed down on the cloud. When he was still a mile away, he used a spell. Instantly, a light sword ray flew up and split into 24 rays. They turned into a half-moon cold star and shot down. When Feng Haiyang saw this, he quickly used a spell to summon a devil to block the attack. At the same time, he quickly used his escape technique to retreat. After retreating for 1,000 feet, he hid in the dark clouds again. He looked around and saw that other than Zhang Yan, there were a few more rays of light coming from all directions. If he continued to fight here, he would be in danger of being surrounded again. He thought to himself, Yang Bai and Zhu Xian are already dead, Shenin Feng is not a concern, but the remaining people are not easy to deal with. If I continue to fight, I might not be able to gain the upper hand in a short period of time. It would be a waste of my mana. It seems like the best plan is to fight and delay. After making up his mind, he didn't stay here anymore. He leaped up into a yellow smoke and disappeared. Not long after, everyone, including Zhang Yan, suddenly felt their bodies become lighter. They realized that the trapping technique had been removed. They all became spirited and activated their escape techniques. After a few rounds, they gathered on top of a flying mountain. When they looked down, they saw that the dark clouds and devil chi were gradually dispersing, but Feng Haiyang was nowhere to be found. Sun Huaying looked around for a while, then suddenly flew away on a sword ray. After a while, she came back and shook her head, I can't find him within 5 miles of this direction. Zhang Yan thought for a while and said, Feng Haiyang would not retreat just like that. I think he is hiding somewhere and waiting for a chance. Zhong and Luo both nodded in agreement. Hu Xian's heart sank. He had many tricks up his sleeves. Even if he couldn't kill Feng Haiyang this time, he could still come up with another plan. However, with the death of the 2 Yuanyang sect disciples, many of his escape routes were blocked. In this situation, Feng Haiyang actually had an advantage over them. He glanced at Elder Shen and saw that he was sitting on a rock with a pale face. Hu Xian asked, how is fellow Daoist Shen? Elder Shen clasped his hands together and sighed, thank you, spiritual master Hua. I was in a hurry to escape just now, so I used the precious treasure of our sect. The Golden Earth Axis spell was a precious treasure of Guangyuan, but it was not easy to use it. He had used it twice in a day, so it was hard for him to recover. Zhong Muqing frowned and said to Hu Xian, "Senior martial brother, we can't stay here any longer. Let's go find the Junyang pot now, in case Feng Haiyang takes it away again." Hu Xian nodded slightly. This was a reasonable suggestion. No matter whether Feng Haiyang had really retreated or was hiding in the dark, they had to find the Junyang pot. As long as they could get the pot, they would have the final say. Luo Qingyu asked, "What should we do, fellow Taoist Shen?" Elder Shen would not be able to fight for a period of time. In fact, this was more troublesome than killing him. If they left him alone, Feng Haiyang would only need to send a demon to kill him. However, if they were to take care of him, they would need to split their manpower, which was not appropriate. Zhong Muqing said lightly, "I have an idea, but I don't know if fellow Taoist Shen is willing to do it." Elder Shen understood what he meant. He first looked at Zhang Yan, and when he saw the latter nodding, he stood up shakily and clasped his hands together. "My mana is not good enough, so I don't want to be a burden to all of you. I'm willing to withdraw from the sword battle." Hu Xian saw that Elder Shen knew when to advance and retreat, so he nodded. He pondered for a while and took out a jade talisman from his sleeve pocket. He handed it to Elder Shen and said in a friendly manner, "Fellow Taoist Shen, if there's anything in Guangyuan in the future, you can come to Qinsang with this talisman to look for me." Elder Shen straightened his robe, took a few steps forward, and received it respectfully. He clasped his hands together and said, "Thank you, spiritual master Hua." He took out a few talisman papers from his sleeve pocket and gave them to everyone. He said, "This is my Guangyuan talisman edict. It might be useful to all of you, so please accept it." Although Hu Xian and the others accepted it, it was obvious that they were just being polite and did not really care about the talisman papers. Elder Shen finally walked in front of Zhang Yan and offered a stack of talisman papers with both hands. He said, "Spiritual Master Zhang, I have nothing to thank you for taking care of me. I can only offer these talismans in hopes that they can help fellow Taoist." Zhang Yan reached out to take the talisman, but his heart was slightly moved. He took it calmly and said, "Take care, fellow Taoist Shen. When I return from the sword battle, I'll pay you a visit." Elder Shen took a step back and bowed. He said, "Fellow Taoist, I'll take my leave." He took out the talisman paper and chanted a spell. After a while, he felt his body become empty. No matter how much transcendence energy a cultivator had in their body, the talisman paper would absorb it all in one go. However, the stronger the transcendence energy, the faster it could be used. After about 20 breaths, a dazzling light spread out like a rising cloud and covered Elder Shen. The spiritual energy was suddenly pushed away, and everyone could not help but take a few steps back. They saw a golden light shoot up from the ground and fly away from the star stone. Hu Xian watched the light fly away, then he turned around to face the others. He said, "Everyone, there are only 5 of us left now. Honestly speaking, it's not a good idea to surround and kill Feng Haiyang. He was the top disciple of the top 10 disciples of Qinsang School. This time, he came to the sword battle to ensure that every disciple returned to the school. Otherwise, he would not be able to explain himself when he returned. If they insisted on surrounding and killing Feng Haiyang, even if they could kill him, it would not be worth it if some of them died." Zhong Muqing was aware of his concerns, so he asked, "What do you have in mind, Senior Hua?" Hu Xian's gaze moved back and forth between Zhang Yan and Sun Huaying. He said, "Let's move together later and pretend to search for the Junyang pot. I expect Feng Haiyang will definitely come to stop us. At that time, my 2 junior brothers and I will try to hold him back, then fellow Taoist Sun and junior brother Zhang will search for the Junyang pot. With your sword escape technique, you can leave first. I believe Feng Haiyang will not be able to catch up to you." Since they could not kill Feng Haiyang, they could only settle for the next best thing. Their goal had changed, so their strategy had to change accordingly. The five of them moved together. Although they were not afraid of Feng Haiyang, Sun Huaying and Zhang Yan could not use their sword escape technique. The only way to break the stalemate was to use their strengths to the fullest. Hu Xian cupped his hands at Sun Huaying and said politely, "What do you think, fellow Taoist Sun?" Sun Huaying lowered his head and thought for a while. He said, "Right now, we are only defending against a strong enemy. Since fellow Taoist Hua has a plan, we will follow your plan. I have no objections." Luo Qingyu thought about it carefully and nodded. Even if the three of them could not defeat Feng Haiyang, it would not be difficult for them to defend against him. Moreover, Zhang Yan and Sun Huaying would be able to use their strengths to their fullest. This was indeed the most appropriate choice. Zhong Muqing looked at the crowd and stood up. He said, "I think this is not a good idea." Hu Xian smiled. "Junior brother Zhong, if you have any objections, you can tell me." Zhong Muqing said seriously, "Senior brother Hua's idea is not bad. However, I think that fellow Taoist Sun and junior brother Zhang should hold Feng Haiyang back while the three of us search for the Junyang pot." Hu Xian pondered for a while and glanced at Luo Qingyu. The latter understood and asked with a smile, "Senior brother, may I ask what the reason is?" Zhong Muqing pointed at Zhang Yan and said in a deep voice, "Have you ever thought about it? Junior brother Zhang has a lot of talismans with him. If I were Feng Haiyang, I would definitely target him first. If he went to look for the Junyang pot, I would risk my life to stop him. However, if it was the other way around, the three of us would have a higher chance of winning. P.S. I strongly recommend Jiang Shan Beyond the Fog's new book, Solitary Way. Jiang Shan is a veteran xianxia author. His books have always been good, and they are all complete. I recommend everyone to read them." Chapter 598. Hu Xian remained silent. What Zhong Muqing said was not completely unreasonable. After all, no one knew what Feng Haiyang was thinking. However, now that Zhang Yan was here in the name of the Yaoyin clan, the rules of Qinsang school could not restrict him. If he was unwilling, Hu Xian could not force him. No matter what, he still had to agree to it. After thinking about it, he turned around and asked, "Junior brother Zhang, what do you think?" Zhang Yan had a few thoughts in his mind. If Feng Haiyang really had his eyes on him, no matter what he did, the result would be the same. However, if Feng Haiyang valued the Junyang pot more, he would most likely go after the person who was looking for it. After thinking about it, he smiled and waved his sleeves to give out the bright moon mirror. He said, "I can lend this mirror to senior brother Hua. It will be easier to find the talisman order." Hu Xian stretched out his hand and took the mirror. He could tell what Zhang Xian's choice was from his words, so he nodded at him and said, "Junior brother Zhang, this matter concerns the outcome of the sword battle. There's no time to argue right now, so I won't bother with pleasantries." After that, he held the mirror in his hand and shone it at an area. After a long time, he checked the situation within a few hundred miles. Zhong Muqing took half a step forward and asked with concern, "Senior brother, how is it?" Hu Xian shook his head and said, "We need to look elsewhere." Luo Qingyu smiled and said, "The Junyang pot will wander around. If it was so easy to find, Feng Haiyang would not have to fight with us here." Zhong Muqing pondered and said, "Feng Haiyang came from the west. He must have searched that area. Let's go in the opposite direction and head to the east first." Everyone agreed with this statement. After the discussion was settled, they all activated their escape techniques and flew into the sky. The five of them did not gather together. Instead, Zhang Yan and Sun Huaying went together. The three of them from Qinsang school went their separate ways. Just now, everyone had found out that Feng Haiyang had just entered the 3rd degree. After all, Feng Haiyang had just entered the 3rd stage. Although the power of the Forbidden Lock technique was not weak, it could only cover a radius of 7 to 8 miles. It would be impossible for it to improve any further in a short period of time. That was why they agreed to be 10 miles apart from each other. As a result, it was unable to trap everyone inside in one go. Feng Haiyang was hiding several kilometers away. He had been paying attention to the movements of the disciples of the Divine Profound sect. When he saw that they had used their treasured mirror and that they were still flying towards the east, he immediately became more vigilant. The devil had not explored that area yet, so the Junyang pot might be there. He did not dare to let the people from the celestial sect go there. He immediately activated the Yellow Springs escape art and turned into yellow smoke as he chased after them. Not long after, he circled to the front from the side. After standing still, he made a hand seal and turned into a tumbling water that was more than 30 miles long. It blocked the way. At the same time, there were more than 1,000 devils coming from both sides. The disciples of the celestial sect had been waiting for Feng Haiyang to come out. When they saw him, they were all excited. Zhang Yan and Sun Huaying did not stop. Instead, they rushed forward. The three of them from Qinsang School suddenly turned to the south and activated the thunder technique at the same time. Among them, Zhong Muqing's Sheiwiking thunder technique was the most powerful. Immediately, the devils exploded one by one. Sun Huaying arrived in front of the water and stopped. She shouted coldly and rode a sword light. Like a shooting star, she cut through the air. Although Feng Haiyang was not afraid, if he took the sword head-on, even if he could come out of the water, he would still miss the opportunity. Therefore, although he was unwilling, he could only dodge first. He was slower by a beat. Zhang Yan made a hand seal and shook the sword pellet away. It turned into 36 swords and flew in all directions. They did not want to kill this person, but to block his path. Huxian and the others had prepared for that attack for a long time. Therefore, it was very powerful. In a blink of an eye, it wiped out more than 1,000 devils. There were no more obstacles in front of them. Without hesitation, the three of them flew away. According to their previous plan, they needed to take advantage of the time when Sun and Zhang were temporarily entangled with Feng Haiyang and escape before he could react. Feng Haiyang was surprised and wanted to stop them. However, Sun Huaying's sword light intertwined and pinned him to the spot. Previously, Huxian and the others did not fight with Feng Haiyang directly. They only listened to Yang Bai and his wife's explanation. The arrangement of the siege was very careless and there were many flaws. However, this time, because they had already fought with him once, they had a good understanding of his abilities. Therefore, they made a thorough arrangement and successfully held him in place. In a short while, the three people from Qinsang School were already far away. When Feng Haiyang saw this, how could he not see through the plans of the people from the celestial sect? His eyes flickered and a thought appeared in his mind. Huxian and the others can't compete with me. Why don't I try to kill Zhang Yan and Sun Huaying first? However, when he thought about it, he felt that it was inappropriate. His goal was to prevent the people from the celestial sect from obtaining any Junyang Qi. How could it be so easy to kill Sun and Zhang Yan? If he stayed here for too long, who knew if the Junyang pot would be taken away by the people from the celestial sect? Just now, he could clearly see that the treasure mirror was in Huxian's hands. Zhong Muqing had previously thought that Zhang Yan would be targeted because he had several decrees on him, but Feng Haiyang didn't think so. The reason was that in his opinion, Zhang Yan was still a disciple of Qinsang School. Even though he was strong, his ranking was still lower than Hua and Zhong. Judging from the actions of the people in front of him, the decrees were most likely given to Huxian. That way, they could take away most of the Junyang Qi in one go. Feng Haiyang's thoughts turned very fast. He immediately decided not to get entangled with the two people. At this moment, he felt a chill on his body again. As his eyes turned, he saw another sword light coming. The two of them hooked their fingers, and a devil took the initiative to hit the flying sword. At the same time, he jumped into the conveyance light, wanting to chase after Huxian and the others. Sun Huaying's eyes were cold. With a point of her finger, she used the so close, yet worlds apart technique. When the sword light was about to touch the devil, it suddenly disappeared. When it reappeared, it was already behind Feng Haiyang. With the sound of the sword, the white light was like lightning, and it cut the devil into two. The reason why the devil could block the sword light before was because he didn't know that the flying sword could not cut it. Now that they met again, he wouldn't make the same mistake again. Instead, Feng Haiyang didn't have time to react, and he was cut. Seeing that his sword was successful, the high cloud above Zhang Yan's head shook, and in an instant, it became 1,000 feet wide. After a while, dozens of purple thunderbolts struck down, and they took the opportunity to break the tribulation water in the middle, making it difficult for them to gather again. At this moment, one of the water droplets swayed, and in an instant, it flew into the distance. With a rumble, another turbid wave surged out, and a yellow smoke flew up. When it was still in the air, it spun around, and Feng Haiyang appeared again. His face was cold, and he raised his hand to grab in the direction. After a while, the two of them suddenly felt an invisible pressure coming from all directions, and it pressed down on them with all its might. Their bodies couldn't help but stiffen. Zhang Yan instantly felt that Feng Haiyang's heaven and earth seal technique this time was much more powerful than the last time. Not only did its power increase greatly, but it was also faster to use it. It was obvious that after using this technique repeatedly, he was getting more familiar with it. He raised his head and saw that after Feng Haiyang used this technique, he didn't bother about them anymore. Instead, he flew towards the south and chased after them. Hence, he summoned the star's sword pill in his heart. In the ancient times of the sky, there were 36 sword lights that were like golden rainbows and silver stars, and they flew towards them from all directions. Sun Huaying could tell that this was a good time to attack, so she also used her technique to control her sword. The sword pill suddenly turned into a stream of light, and it chased after Feng Haiyang from afar. Feng Haiyang was attacked from all directions, and he was blocked from all directions. He didn't even have a place to dodge. His body was once again cut into pieces, and he fell into the disastrous water. Zhang Yan's eyes flickered slightly. There was no technique that could not be broken in this world. Ever since he started fighting with Feng Haiyang, he had been secretly thinking about how to break this death substitution technique of his. After a few observations, he had a vague idea of how to break it, but he couldn't confirm it yet. He would have to try again to find out. After a few breaths, the sound of surging waves came from 10,000 feet away. Feng Haiyang emerged from the disastrous water again, and the coldness in his eyes intensified. If he didn't trap or kill the two of them, it would be impossible for him to escape. He took a slight breath, and suddenly, a long cry came from his throat. All of a sudden, the strong wind came whistling, and he raised his wrist, as if he was going to press down. The two of them instantly felt a shocking strong wind coming at them, and they quickly used their protective treasured light. Zhang Yan even took out the Qiankuan leaf and carefully protected himself. This time, Feng Haiyang used all of his strength to control the strong wind, and he faced the two of them head-on. This technique was purely used to attack the opponent with mana. Although the possibility of harming the opponent was next to nothing, it could make the two of them unable to use any techniques. Compared to him, Zhang Yan and Sun Huaying's mana was much weaker. Faced with this most brutal technique, they didn't have a suitable way to break it. They could only defend carefully. However, this technique couldn't last long, and they believed that he would have to stop before long. After Feng Haiyang managed to suppress the two of them, he muttered something and waved his sleeve. Suddenly, an item flew out, and it looked like a painting. After it flew into the air, it grew bigger and bigger with the wind, and it looked like it was going to expand to the ends of the world. Zhang Yan immediately noticed that something was wrong, and he took advantage of the fact that Feng Haiyang's strong wind was slightly weaker to forcefully use the minor universe shifting escape technique. This technique was also greatly restricted in the confinement, but with the support of a strong foundation, he didn't have to worry about his mana running out. He continuously used it more than 10 times, and just as he was about to reach the area of confinement, he felt his eardrums vibrate, and the sky above him darkened. He had already sunk into darkness. After a few more breaths, he suddenly saw light, and countless mountains appeared in front of him. Among the mountains, many winding paths appeared. Feng Haiyang looked down, and when he saw that everything within a 10-mile radius was covered by this painting, he calmed down. This treasure was called the illusionary painting of 10,000 mountains, and it was given to him by a good friend in his sect. It was said that it was also obtained from a disciple of Butian Pavilion. There were more than 100 paths in the painting, and only 9 of them could be used to get out. If one took the wrong path, he would have to start all over again. Because it couldn't hurt people, it could only trap them, and it consumed a lot of mana to use, Feng Haiyang had always regarded it as useless. However, in order to get rid of the 2 of them, he didn't hesitate to use this treasure with a lot of mana. He coldly snorted and thought, even if the 2 of them were lucky and walked the right path, it would take at least 15 minutes to get out of the painting. The most important thing now is to find Huxian and the others, so that the Junyang pot won't be taken away. He leaped up, turned into a yellow smoke, and rushed toward the south. Chapter 599. Feng Haiyang stood on top of the cloud with the sun-bathing mirror in his hand. He shook it towards the south and a ray of light shot out. Not long after, just as the mirror light was about to find something, a bright light suddenly flashed, and the mirror turned into a vast expanse of white. He sneered. He only needed to find where Huxian and the other 2 were. As for the specific situation, it was the same whether he knew or not. It was not like there would be more people appearing out of nowhere. He put away the mirror and soared into the sky. Xingshi South Road. Huxian kept the moon-bathing mirror and said, "Junior brothers, I think Feng Haiyang will catch up soon." Zhong Muqing frowned. It seems like he doesn't want Xianmen to get the Junyang pot. He did not believe that Feng Haiyang had already killed Sun and Zhang Huaying since he caught up so quickly. It could only be said that Feng Haiyang valued Sun Hu and the others more. As for Zhang Yan and Sun Huaying not being able to hold Feng Haiyang back longer, nobody complained. Everyone knew that Feng Haiyang had the heaven and earth locking technique and his mana was high. If he wanted to leave, nobody would be able to stop him. Luo Qingyu said, "Senior brother Hua, should we wait for junior brother Zhang and Jinren Sun to catch up and find a chance to escape?" Huxian immediately rejected the suggestion. He said, "We were able to make a move first because we caught him off guard. Feng Haiyang is someone who has suffered once. This time, he will definitely be more vigilant. This will not work." He pondered deeply for a moment before he said, "Presently, we've already searched the southern path, yet we've found nothing, so we can only search the eastern and northern paths. I'll stay behind. Junior brother Luo, junior brother Zhong, both of you go ahead with the mirrors." Luo Qingyu was shocked and quickly tried to dissuade him. "Senior brother, why? We can't." Feng Haiyang was a Yuanying level 3 cultivator. Even if the 3 of them worked together, they could only barely protect themselves. If Huxian fought him alone, the outcome was obvious. Huxian's attitude was firm. He said, "If I stay behind alone, Feng Haiyang will not miss this opportunity. I don't think Feng Haiyang will miss such a good opportunity, so I can keep him occupied for a while. Junior brothers, don't worry. I value my life a lot. I won't die in vain. With the lofty cloud tower to protect me, I won't get hurt. If worst comes to worst, I'll just leave this world." Luo Qingyu said seriously, "I can do it for you. Why do you need to do it yourself?" However, Huxian shook his head. If Luo Qingyu had been the one to do it, Feng Haiyang might not have stopped. If it was Huxian himself, the bait would have been big enough. Zhong Muqing, who had been silent earlier, said slowly, "Let me do it. Senior brother Hua, we don't know if we can find the Junyang pot in front of us. We still need you to take charge of this place. I'll leave this matter to you." Huxian frowned and said, "Junior brother." Zhong Muqing interrupted him and said, "I know what senior martial brother Hua is worried about. I have a plan. Even though it's risky, we might be able to deceive this person. His lips moved, and he transmitted his voice to say something. After Huxian heard it, his eyes gradually lit up and he said, Junior Marshal Brother Zhong has a good plan. It's a little risky, but it's considered thoughtful. Zhong Muqing saw that Luo Qingyu still wanted to say something, so he shook his head and said, Junior Marshal Brother Zhong, we don't have much time. It's not a good time to argue. I have the supernatural power of 2 images heart. If Feng Haiyang is willing to fight with me, we can at least buy some time. Time was pressing, and there was no time to think carefully. Huxian thought for a while and made a decision. He said, all right, let's do as Junior Marshal Brother Zhong said. As soon as he spoke, Luo Qingyu did not say anything else. The two of them cupped their hands at Zhong Muqing and flew away from the south to the east. Zhong Muqing turned around and stood in mid-air, waiting quietly. In less than a moment, he saw a yellow smoke coming from afar. He raised his voice and said, Sage Feng, I'm here to stop you. If you don't dare to fight, feel free to leave. Feng Haiyang was surprised at first, then he laughed and said, Fellow Taoist Zhong, you don't have to provoke me. I know what you want. To be honest, if the 3 of you are together, I can't do anything to you. But if you're alone, I won't let you go. None of the people he killed earlier were from the 3 major sects, so he did not think much of them. However, Zhong Muqing was ranked second among the top 10 disciples of Qinsong, second only to Huxian. He shook his shoulder and thousands of demons were sent out. This was to prevent Huxian from ordering Zhong Muqing to come out while he hid nearby to trick Zhong Muqing. In fact, it was the most convenient to use the mirror to investigate. However, Zhong Muqing was in front of him, so he did not have a chance to take a closer look. Zhong Muqing stood there and did not make a move. Since Feng Haiyang did not move, he was happy to do so. He only hoped that he could drag this on for as long as possible. Feng Haiyang looked around for a while and made sure that there was no one else within 10 miles. Without further delay, he sent the demons further away. He then shouted and opened up the tribulation water. It broke through the huge waves and rushed forward. His escape technique, magic power, and divine power were all higher than his opponents. Thus, he did not use any fancy tricks and used the most direct method to attack his opponent. Zhong Muqing's expression changed slightly. This was the situation that he did not want to see the most. However, he had no way to retreat at this moment. He could only face it head-on. He shouted in a low voice, and the strong cloud above his head surged. Whirling strong wind was produced, and it was like a hurricane that went against the current. It rumbled and went straight up to resist the tribulation water. He cultivated the water and wood technique, so he could be considered to have a long-lasting effect. However, the difference in magic power between him and Feng Haiyang was too big. In just 20 breaths, he gradually felt that he could not endure this kind of collision. Feng Haiyang's expression was calm. This kind of real battle was the most advantageous to him. According to his estimation, he would be able to exhaust this person to death in at most 5 minutes. After a while, cold sweat appeared on Zhong Muqing's forehead. He was panting as if he was seriously ill. His whole body was trembling, and even the protective light on his body was flickering. It was obvious that he had consumed too much of his magic power and was at the end of his rope. A cold light appeared in Feng Haiyang's eyes. He suddenly felt that his chance had come. He shook his sleeve and a pale white light flew out. Although Zhong Muqing was exhausted, he did not have the power to resist. He made a hand seal, and a jade umbrella that emitted a gentle light flew down from the strong cloud. It was like a canopy that covered the sky. This treasure was given to him by Qin Yu. It was used by her in the past, so it was not an ordinary treasure. The white light circled around it a few times, but it was unable to break through. When Feng Haiyang saw this, he pointed his finger downwards. 3 faint shadows of demons appeared in the void and tried to bite Zhong Muqing's body. Zhong Muqing's expression changed. He immediately sensed the peculiarity of these devils. In his current state, he most likely wouldn't be able to resist them. He snorted and a speck of light flew out from his sleeve. In the blink of an eye, it actually transformed into a huge palace. Countless restrictions flickered incessantly. When the tribulation water slammed into it, it was as if it was slamming into a reef, causing it to shatter. Great Wei's Cloud Tower. Feng Haiyang's eyes narrowed. He had planned to kill this person just now, but he did not expect to have this item. He sneered and said, "Even if you have this item to protect you, you will only be struggling at death's door." The name of Great Wei's Yunke was well known to him as well. Although this item was extremely strong in defense, it consumed a lot of mana. With Zhong Muqing's ability, he would not be able to maintain it for long. When the time came, he would still be dead. Hence, he took out the incantation and added some more force. The tribulation water surged up layer by layer. Zhong Muqing sat in the cloud tower and resisted the attacks of the calamity water. After 100 breaths, his face gradually turned pale. He sat firmly and took out the talisman from his sleeve. He thought to himself, "Senior Hua, I can only hold on until this point. I will have to leave first." He chanted the incantation and opened the talisman. In an instant, the remaining magic power in his body was sucked dry, and his body went limp. Without the support of magic power, Great Wei's Cloud Tower immediately turned into a light and went back into his sleeve. The calamity water that surrounded the area was squeezing up. At this moment, it was as if there was no dam. With a rumble, the huge waves crashed into the inner circle. Suddenly, a ray of light flashed in Zhong Muqing's eyes. He looked like he was on the verge of death, but he was suddenly full of energy. He sat up and shouted. The high cloud above his head shook, and his magic power surged. His gang qi overflowed and blocked the calamity water that was rushing toward him. Feng Haiyang was stunned. He looked at the talisman hanging in front of him and frowned. He thought to himself, could this be the two images heart transformation technique? It's really magical. The two images heart transformation technique divided the spirit into two, the inner and outer spirits. When fighting with others, if the body was severely injured or the magic power was depleted, the outer spirit could be hidden in the heart and the inner spirit could be drawn out to control the body. After the exchange, not only would the magic power be restored, the injuries could be healed as well. It was as if the body had two lives. However, the person who cultivated this technique had to cultivate the two complementary techniques in Qinsang school. Among the top 10 disciples, Zhong Muqing was the only one who was proficient in this technique. Zhong Muqing was in his peak condition and he had the protection of a rare treasure. With all his strength and defense, Feng Haiyang could not do anything to him. After another 10 breaths, the talisman moved and exploded into a ball of golden light. It circled around him, broke through the calamity water, and disappeared in the blink of an eye. In the Myriad Mountains illusory painting, Zhang Yan tried to observe it once and understood some of its profoundness. He could not fly in the painting, and he could not use treasures to explore the path ahead. Otherwise, it would disturb the spiritual opportunity and make it more complicated. Apart from that, there were no other abnormalities. Feng Haiyang was probably using it to delay the two of them. When he first entered the painting, he vaguely saw Sun Huaying falling in with him. However, she disappeared later on. It was probably because she was separated by the mountain's illusion. However, with this Shaoqing disciple's ability, it should be fine. He smiled and stepped into the painting. There was actually no meridian to be found on the path in the painting. It depended on each person's luck. Fortunately, his luck was not bad. He walked out of the painting in less than a minute and shouted. He turned into a ray of light and charged into the sky. He looked around and saw that Sun Huaying had not come out yet, so he stood on the spot and waited. However, after waiting for a while, she did not come out. Zhang Yan looked at the sky and thought, I wonder when Jinren Sun will come out. I can't wait anymore. Why don't I go first? He took out a letter and used his spiritual opportunity to write a few words. Then, he left it on the spot and flew towards the south on a sword light. P.S. Friendly recommendation, Rebirth as a Mountain. Recently, there were many books about rebirth. This book was about Buzhou Mountain. Chapter 600. Zhang Yan flew on his flying sword, and not long after, he arrived at the South Starstone Road. This place was densely covered with flying peaks, and there was one every several hundred zhang. His flying light flew here and there, and not long after, an open area appeared in front of him. As far as the eye could see, it was full of floating rubble, broken branches, and broken leaves, and there were still traces of battle. At this moment, he looked around and suddenly saw a demon hiding behind a gravel, looking around sneakily. He smiled and casually shot out a purple cloud heavenly thunder, which extinguished the demon instantly. He looked around and saw that there was nothing unusual. Then, he flicked his sleeve and a sword rainbow appeared and continued to move forward. After Feng Haiyang forced Zhong Muqing to retreat, he chased after Hu Xian and Luo Qingyu. With the help of the mirror, he could always keep up with them. Initially, the two of them used the mirror to hide themselves. However, they seemed to know that it was useless, so they stopped hiding and just flew on the light. Unknowingly, the three of them arrived at the East Star Stone Road and the distance between them was getting closer. As Feng Haiyang was flying, he suddenly felt something. He looked around and his eyelids twitched. He thought to himself, how did Zhang Yan escape from the painting of Thousand Mountains so quickly? Sun Huaying will probably catch up soon. I need to catch up with Hu Xian quickly, otherwise, I will be entangled by the two of them again. While he was distracted, the scenery around him changed a little. He didn't notice it at first, but after walking for a while, he clearly felt as if he had broken into another world, and there was an endless amount of willow green air pressing on his body. He immediately knew that something was wrong. He shouted, and a strong wind swirled around him, stirring up a whistling gale. The Yin Thunder Devil Chi flew out continuously, blasting away the green gas around him. He shook his body, and without delay, turned into a wisp of yellow smoke and fled. The surrounding spiritual vigor suddenly surged and there was an endless amount of green cloud wind that was pressing down on him, chasing after him. It was originally a gentle ball of green cloud wind that was light and clear, but when it reached the side of his body, it exploded. It kept cutting away the tribulation water that was surrounding him. He ignored it and focused on escaping. After a while, Feng Haiyang felt that his body was light. He knew that he had escaped. He flicked his sleeves and flew to the sky. He turned around to take a look. The green light in the formation dispersed like a curtain, and Luo Qingyu appeared from within. He stood on a peak. He cupped his hands and said, "Sage Feng, I've been waiting here for a long time. If you want to chase after senior brother Hua, you'll have to go through me first." Feng Haiyang took a few glances at the center of the formation. He saw that there were 72 formation mountains that were shaking with wind and thunder. They were trembling non-stop as if they were accumulating great power. He thought to himself, this formation is really extraordinary. Even if I'm able to break through it, I'll surely have to expend a great deal of effort, and it's even possible for me to drag it out for a few hours. Moreover, this person isn't afraid of fighting me one-on-one. I presume he's similar to Zhong Muqing and possesses the Qinsang School's lofty cloud tower. Fighting him is rather unwise. He sneered and didn't say a word. The tribulation water in front of him surged and released thousands of devils. He commanded them to surge downward. At the same time, his body shook and he turned into a wisp of yellow smoke that shot up into the sky. Luo Qingyu raised his eyebrows and raised his hand. There was wind and thunder at the 72 peaks beneath his feet. The moment the devils entered the peaks, they were blasted into pieces. When he turned to look at Feng Haiyang again, he saw that Feng Haiyang had already flown far away. He couldn't help but feel that it was a pity. After he had refined the Qingping mist formation repeatedly, it was much stronger than it was during the battle with Zhang Yan. Moreover, this formation was very difficult to detect when it was used in the mountains where there were many plants. the cultivator would unknowingly fall into its trap. He initially wanted to lure Feng Haiyang into the depths of the mountain and use the Qingji wind and thunder ritual to torture him for a while. Unfortunately, Feng Haiyang's mana was very high and he was very vigilant. Once he realized that something was wrong, he forcefully retreated and returned without any success. If it was an ordinary Yuanying cultivator, he would have already succeeded. But it doesn't matter. Since he's gone, I'll act according to plan. Luo Qingyu chuckled. With a tap of his foot, a green cloud lifted his body up into the air. He checked his bearings and decided not to head toward the wind-chasing ocean. Instead, he rode on a gust of wind and headed toward the middle road. After flying for a while, he saw a familiar conveyance light flying towards him. He couldn't help but feel happy and shouted, "Is that junior brother Zhang?" When Zhang Yan saw Luo Qingyu, he was slightly stunned. When he got closer, he stopped the conveyance light and raised his hand to salute. He asked in surprise, "Why is senior brother Luo here? Where are senior brother Hua and senior brother Zhong?" Luo Qingyu stopped the cloud light and returned the salute. He smiled and said, "I'm here on senior brother Hua's order to look for junior brother Zhang." He looked behind Zhang Yan and asked, "Where is Zhenren Sun?" Zhang Yan told him about the situation just now and then said, "Although the map can trap people, it won't take long for fellow Taoist Sun to come out." Luo Qingyu smiled mysteriously and said, "It's better that Sun Huaying is not here." He reached into his sleeves and took out an item. He presented it with both hands and said, "Junior brother Zhang, this item is returned to its owner." Zhang Yan took a look and realized that it was the moon mirror. His eyes flashed and he shook his sleeves to keep the mirror into his pouch. He asked, "Why is this treasure with you?" Luo Qingyu smiled and said, "This is senior brother Zhong's plan. He once said that since Feng Haiyang came after us, we should change our plan. Junior brother Zhong will go and look for the pot. Feng Haiyang will be in a hurry and will not notice it. We can deceive him." Zhong Muqing thought that Feng Haiyang came after them because they had the mirror with them. He was afraid that they would get the Junyang pot before them. If that was the case, they might as well adjust their strategy. They would find a chance to return the mirror to Zhang Yan secretly and ask him to look for the pot. Then they would deal with Feng Haiyang. However, it was not easy to do so. Zhong Muqing was very daring. He suggested that he should go up and stop Feng Haiyang first, so as to create an illusion that he was trying his best to delay Feng Haiyang. In this way, when Luo Qingyu went up to stop Feng Haiyang would most likely ignore him. After Feng Haiyang left, Luo Qingyu would look for Zhang Yan and return the mirror. This was a risky move from the beginning to the end. Feng Haiyang would fail if he felt something was wrong. However, it was worth a try under such a disadvantageous situation. Luo Qingyu pointed at his feet and said, "My two senior brothers and I have already scouted the south road, but we did not find any trace of the treasured pot. Feng Haiyang is chasing after senior brother Hua in the east, so you can only go north. It would be best if you can find the treasured pot, but if you can't, junior brother, please come back to meet us." Zhang Yan nodded. Since they had come this far, there was at least some hope of success. However, he still had to be careful in case Feng Haiyang realized something was wrong and turned around to chase after him. He thought for a while and smiled. "I want to ask for something from you, senior brother." Luo Qingyu said casually, "What do you want?" "Just tell me." Zhang Yan asked, "I wonder if you have the fake pot that we got from Lu Muqiu with you?" Luo Qingyu was stunned and laughed. "I thought it was something important." "Junior brother, you can have it." He reached into his sleeve and searched for a while. He took out the fake pot and passed it to Chuli. Zhang Yan kept it. Since time was running out, he did not say anything else. After he bid farewell to Luo Qingyu, he turned into a conveyance light and flew towards the north with all his might. After Luo Qingyu saw him off, he flew up into the sky and turned into a stream of light. He flew into the sky and went to help Huxian. Zhang Yan became one with his sword and flew towards the north at lightning speed. When he reached the middle road, he stopped and landed on a flying peak. He took out the fake pot and a talisman. He activated his mana and turned it into a stream of clear spiritual chi and went into the mouth of the pot. He threw the pot on the ground and chanted a few incantations. He pointed at it and the pot seemed to have a mind of its own. It immediately jumped up and jumped back and forth on the rocks. Zhang Yan smiled and waved his sleeve. A strong wind blew and sent the pot to the south. This was to confuse Feng Haiyang. If Feng Haiyang found out about it, he would come to check it himself if he could not tell if it was real or fake. This would buy him a lot of time. After he was done, he rode on his sword again. This time, he did not stop at all. In less than 45 minutes, he arrived at the north side of the Star Stone Road. The Star Stone was not perfectly round. The east and west sides were very big, and the north and south sides were relatively small. This place was thousands of miles away from the east side. Feng Haiyang would not be able to see this place. Even if he knew he was here, he would not be able to rush over. Zhang Yan chose a flying peak and landed. He picked up the bright moon mirror and shone it in front of him. After a while, he changed to another location. He looked back and forth for the time it took to burn a stick of incense. He looked through the area of hundreds of miles, but he found nothing. However, he was not in a hurry. The pot had a mind of its own and did not want to be caught. Feng Haiyang took it last time, so this time it must be hiding. He had to search carefully. If he could not find it, he would think of a way to go to the east side. He held the mirror in his hand and flew forward. After another hundreds of miles, he found that he had reached the end of the north side of the Star Stone Road. He looked up and saw a huge cliff. The top and bottom were gradually covered by fog and clouds. He could not see the end. There were countless old vines and branches climbing on the wall. Inside, there was a faint crystal light, like salt and snow. These were the outer heavens elite that gathered in the cracks of the rock. There were also a few high cliffs with waterfalls rushing down, making loud noises. He looked at it for a moment and picked up the treasure mirror. He activated his mana and a ray of mirror light shot forward. This light was extremely strange. As long as it wasn't a natural concealment object, it could illuminate the inside and outside of the ravine in the belly of the mountain. After illuminating the mirror for half a day, he suddenly saw something in the mirror that looked like the root of a tree seemed to be startled. Seeing the mirror light coming over, it swayed a little, as if it was dissatisfied. It bounced a few times on the mountain rock, and suddenly dropped down into the mountain stream. Zhang Yan's eyes lit up. He waved his sleeves and leaped up. He rushed more than 100 miles and arrived at the boundary. He circled in the sky and slowly floated down. He landed on a strange phosphorescent stone and took out the talisman order. He held it between two fingers and shook it gently. After a while, a ray of clear light floated out. When it came close, he grabbed it and brought it to his eyes. He wiped the mud on the pot and looked at it carefully. He first let out a sigh, then a long and clear laugh came from the cliff. Chapter 601. Zhang Yan looked at the Junyang pot in his hand. His eyes were deep. Since the pot was in his hand, he could take away the essence and return to the Star Stone. However, this place was unique and similar to the Spirit Cave. If he could cultivate here for 3 years, his cultivation would improve greatly. This was a great opportunity. How could he give it up so easily? As he thought of this, he waved his sleeves and 5 golden talismans flew out and floated in the sky. He raised his finger and slightly activated his mana. The talismans trembled and were guided by the Qi dynamic. 5 streams of Junyang essence Qi were drawn out from the pot. The Qi was clear and bright. Just by looking at it, he felt as if he had drunk a cup of nectar. His whole body felt comfortable. After taking a few deep breaths, he calmed his mind and waved his hand to absorb the Qi. He took out 5 more snow jade porcelain bottles and put them into the bottles. After that, he thought to himself, I wonder if Senior Marshal Brother Hua can block Feng Haiyang? After thinking about it carefully, he took out a yellow talisman from his sleeve. It was a gift from Elder Shen. It could track a cultivator's morale. If Hu Xian and the others were still in the Star Stone, he could use it to find them. With a pinch of his finger, the talisman trembled, and with a flash of light, it flew towards the east. Zhang Yan was refreshed. He shouted and used his sword ray to chase after the talisman. The flying talisman was much faster than a cultivator's flying escape. Even the sword escape could not catch up. After a while, the talisman flew out of his sight. However, he had already identified the direction. He only needed to go in that direction. After flying for a few thousand miles, he suddenly looked up and saw the flying talisman was surrounded by a cloud of green qi that was more than 10 miles wide. Green Peace Mist Formation. Zhang Yan recognized the origin of the green cloud. If he was right, it should be Luo Qingyu who trapped Feng Haiyang in the formation map and they were fighting. Suddenly, he felt something and looked towards the south. He saw a tall and lonely Taoist standing on the peak, his body as straight as a pen. With a thought, Zhang Xian rode the wind and got closer. He floated down and cupped his hands. Taoist Sun, you have arrived. Sun Huaying raised his hand to return the greeting. He did not ask where Zhang Yan had gone or why he had only arrived now. He only said, after I came out of the formation, I received a letter from fellow Taoist and quickly rushed over. I've been here for an hour, but I still haven't entered the formation. No one could intervene in the battle within the formation diagram. They could only wait to find out the result. Zhang Yan knew very well that with Feng Haiyang's current powers, it was only a matter of time before he broke through the formation. Luo Qingyu did not expect to win either. He was just stalling for time. It was a pity that the formation was not easy to refine. If it was destroyed, it would take dozens of years to restore it to its original state. The two of them exchanged a few more words. The blue clouds in front of them rippled as if they were being ravaged by a violent gale. In the blink of an eye, it became shapeless. Both of them raised their eyes to look over, and after a short moment, they suddenly heard thunderclaps resound by their ears as the azure cloud collapsed with a bang, and then they saw two familiar streaks flying out from within. Not long after they flew out, another strand of surging yellow smoke flew out endlessly, and it surged with a baleful aura as it followed closely behind them. The first golden-red light reached the top of the cloud and suddenly turned around. A ball of fire that was as dazzling as colored glass flew out. The yellow smoke seemed to notice that this fire was unusual and didn't dare to touch it at all. It immediately retreated thousands of feet away. With a shake, it released a black tide that was more than 10 miles long. The waves rolled and pushed, and the sound of the tide shook the sky. Another wave surged, and in the blink of an eye, thousands of demons flew out and rushed over menacingly. After Sun Huaying arrived, he had already straightened out his qi meridians and recovered to his peak condition. His entire body was filled with sword will. Seeing that Feng Haiyang had come out of the formation diagram, he could not hold himself back anymore. He let out a clear whistle and dashed forward like a white rainbow. At this moment, the two conveyance lights in the sky suddenly split up. One of them went to meet his opponent, while the other one swayed and flew towards the peak where Zhang Yan was. The conveyance light seemed to be drunk and could not control itself. With a loud bang, it crashed into the peak and created a shallow pit. Luo Qingyu quickly walked out. He looked a little tired. He did not even wipe off the dust on his clothes. He stepped forward and grabbed Zhang Yan's sleeve. He said in a low voice, "Junior brother Zhang, you." Zhang Yan smiled and said, "Fortunately, I did not disappoint you." Luo Qingyu's eyes were immediately filled with joy. After a while, he calmed himself down and let out a sigh of relief. He said, "I've been fighting with Feng Haiyang in the formation map for more than 2 hours. This man is really powerful. He destroyed all 72 of my green mountains of wind and thunder. My mana has been depleted and I need to rest here. I hope you can protect me, junior brother." Zhang Yan looked up and saw that Hu Xian and Sun Huaying were enough to handle the situation. He did not need to intervene for the time being. He nodded and said, I am here. Senior brother Luo, don't worry. Luo Qingyu cupped his hands at him and immediately sat down cross-legged to meditate. At this moment, in the sky, Hu Xian was fearlessly fighting with the torrential water. In the sky, there were continuous sounds of collisions. It was a majestic scene. He did not choose to fight in this way because he was willing to sacrifice his strengths and take advantage of his weaknesses. He had thought it through in advance. After he was caught up by Feng Haiyang, they had a fierce fight. When he was on the brink of defeat, Luo Qingyu arrived in time. He was able to hide in the formation diagram to meditate. At this moment, his mana was fully recovered and his spirit was full. He had secretly estimated that after Feng Haiyang got rid of Zhang Yan and Sun Huaying, he did not stop chasing after him. After that, he fought with Zhong Muqing and Luo Qingyu. Even if he was a Yuanying level 3 cultivator, his mana would be exhausted. At this moment, Feng Haiyang might not be any better than him. Now that there were 4 of them here, he did not believe that they could not defeat this person. How could Feng Haiyang not understand Hu Xian's intention? However, he did not care. The remaining people of Xianmen were here. As long as they could stall him, there was no need to rush. Even if he did not have enough mana, he could retreat in time. No one could catch up with him. He turned his mana and shook the torrential water. Then, he summoned thousands of demons and commanded them to rush forward. Hu Xian shouted loudly. He didn't retreat at all and courageously met them head-on. His entire body was surrounded by the brilliance of golden flames, and he flew out for over 100 feet. He was as dazzling as the blazing sun. The clouds of fire and golden flames densely covered an area of 1.5 kilometers. The thousands of devils were like moths flying into the flames as they collided with each other, causing sparks to fly out incessantly. Most of the devils were incinerated before they could even reach the inner circle. Just when Feng Haiyang was about to activate his mana again, a ray of sword radiance suddenly shot towards him. Before it arrived, the murderous aura had already pierced through the canopy and made his eyes hurt. He could not help but frown. In the face of this killing sword technique, other than attacking, there was no other way to deal with it. With a low growl, the tribulation water beneath his feet rose up and he hid himself. However, with a single slash of his sword, the tribulation water was split into 2. The other half of the tribulation water spun around as if it had lost its master. With a loud rumble, the tribulation water began to pour towards Zhang Yan and Luo Qingyu. When Hu Xian saw this, he waved his sleeves. Golden flames rose to the sky and melted the torrential water. However, the torrential water was so strong that it was like the Milky Way was overturned. It was not something that he could stop in a hurry. Zhang Yan looked at the torrential water. He shook his shoulder calmly and a yellow aura flew up behind him. It condensed into a giant hand and stopped the torrential water. The torrential water was especially muddy. It broke through the spiritual aura and leaked through the gaps between his fingers. However, before he could attack again, he heard the sound of wind and thunder and it was blown away. Zhang Yan looked back and saw that Luo Qingyu had already stood up. He was standing there in high spirits. Obviously, his mana had recovered. The torrential water in the sky seemed to have noticed the change. It suddenly faded and turned into a yellow smoke. It rose to the sky and disappeared. Zhang Yan felt the pressure on his head lighten. He waved his sleeves and dispersed his mana. When Hu Xian saw that Feng Haiyang had retreated, he called out to Sun Huaying, "Fellow Taoist Sun, it's useless to chase after him." Sun Huaying nodded slightly. The underworld escape technique was not inferior to the sword escape technique. Feng Haiyang also had the heaven and earth seal technique. It would be useless to chase after him if they did not travel together. The 2 of them stopped their techniques and descended from the sky. They landed in front of Zhang and Luo. Luo Qingyu took a step forward and said, "Senior brother, junior brother Zhang." Hu Xian raised his hand to stop him. He said in a deep voice, "Feng Haiyang is not far away. This is not the time to talk. We need to find a suitable place to talk." Zhang Yan smiled and said, "There's no need for that. I'll just cast a small spell later." He cast a spell and flicked his finger. After a short while, a thick fog appeared in front of the four of them. The fog spread out in an instant. Soon, the surroundings became a vast expanse of whiteness. It was like a sea of clouds floating in the air. Hu Xian nodded and praised, "Good technique. We're not afraid of being spied on anymore." Luo Qingyu cupped his hands and said excitedly, "Senior brother, junior brother Zhang has obtained the Junyang pot." When Hu Xian heard this, his expression was still very calm. He did not look excited at all. He looked at Zhang Yan and said, "Junior brother, can you take it out and have a look?" Zhang Yan smiled and nodded. He took out the Junyang pot from his sleeve and held it in his palm. He said, "The treasure pot is here." Only then did Sun Huaying know that the Junyang pot was obtained by Zhang Yan. She looked at him in surprise and her eyes flickered. Hu Xian looked at it for a while and confirmed that it was not a fake. He said in a deep voice, "Junior brother Luo, Jinren Sun, let's not waste any more time. Let's take away the qi of essence as soon as possible." Luo Qingyu and Sun Huaying had no objection. They took out the talisman and activated it slightly. A thin strand of qi of essence was drawn out from the mouth of the pot. They then took out the jade bottles that they carried with them and kept the qi of essence. After the three of them kept the qi of essence, Zhang Yan said, "Senior brother Hua, senior brother Luo, fellow Daoist Sun, since we have obtained Junyang's qi of essence, we don't have to worry about our future. Why don't we work together to eliminate Feng Haiyang and make Xianmen the winner of this sword battle? What do you think?" Luo Qingyu was quite tempted. If they won, they could still cultivate here for a few more years, which was a great benefit. However, Hu Xian thought for a while and shook his head. He said, "We have obtained Junyang's qi of essence. We don't have to be obsessed with winning the sword battle. It's best for us to retreat now." As the leader of the 10 disciples of Qinsong, his main goal was to bring the disciples of the sword battle back to the sect safely. Feng Haiyang's supernatural power and Daoist spells were extremely brilliant. His mana was also better than theirs. They had no choice but to fight with him earlier. But now that they had obtained the qi of essence, if they continued to fight, they might make mistakes and cause casualties. It would not be worth it. Chapter 602. Hu Xian looked at Zhang Yan and sighed. He said apologetically, "Junior brother, I know that if it wasn't for you, we wouldn't be able to obtain Junyang's qi of essence. However, Feng Haiyang's escape technique is better than mine and junior brother Luo's, and he also has the heaven and earth confinement technique. If the four of us work together, even if we gain the upper hand, how can we stop him if he wants to escape?" Zhang Yan had expected Feng Haiyang to respond in such a manner. He had already made a plan in his heart. It would be best if he could gather everyone's strength to kill Feng Haiyang. However, if that failed, he would definitely not retreat. He would use all his strength to fight Feng Haiyang. Therefore, he smiled in a carefree manner and cupped his hands together. "Senior's intentions are reasonable. In that case, I will not force you." Hu Xian was slightly relieved. He actually owed Zhang Yan a huge favor by obtaining Junyang's qi of essence. If Zhang Yan insisted, he could not refuse. At this moment, Sun Huaying suddenly said, "Wait, everyone. I have a method that might be worth a try." When he saw everyone looking at him, he said seriously, "I have a divine skill called One Thought Heart Sword. It can kill the enemy with a single thought. However, after this sword is used, the user's mana will be exhausted and he will not be able to defend against the enemy. Therefore, someone must protect him." Zhang Yan's expression changed slightly. With the Shaoqing disciple's temperament, it was not surprising that Sun Huaying was willing to stay and fight with him. However, he did not expect him to have such a divine sword skill. If he did not obtain Jun Yang's Qi of Essence, he would not have said it so easily. Hu Xian had never heard of this swordsmanship before, so he was unable to judge from the few words. It sounded extremely impressive, so it must be the Shaoqing secret art that was rarely publicized. He thought for a while and asked in a low voice, "Fellow Taoist Sun, how confident are you?" Sun Huaying answered without hesitation, "If I can kill Feng Haiyang's Dharma body, then he will definitely die." Luo Qingyu asked doubtfully, "Enlighten Sun. Feng Haiyang has the death substitution technique. How are you going to find out where his Dharma body is?" Sun Huaying said calmly, "Feng Haiyang has fought with others several times. It's not like he's flawless. I've been watching for a long time, and now I have some clues." Although the Netherworld Spring had been passed down for tens of thousands of years, it had never used the death substitution technique. Feng Haiyang had been slashed several times, but he did not die. The external body was a manifestation of the Tao technique, while the real body was hidden within the calamity water. Every time the tribulation water dispersed, he would take a closer look and discover something different. It was most likely the hiding place of the Dharmakaya. Hu Xian could not help but ponder. If it was really as Sun Huaying said, then he could give it a try. If he could eliminate Feng Haiyang, then he would naturally be willing. After all, the fortuitous encounters in this place were hard to come by, and it was not a difficult task to protect others. It was much better than fighting to the death. Thinking of this, he turned around and asked, "Junior brother Luo, what do you think?" Luo Qingyu heard this. He knew that Hu Xian's attitude had softened a little. He cupped his hands and replied, "Senior martial brother, please leave now. I'm not willing to do so." Hu Xian nodded and turned to Sun Huaying, "Fellow Taoist Sun. Junior brother Luo and I have the towering cloud tower. No matter what the outcome is, we can protect you. When you fight with Feng Haiyang later, you can just use your sword." Zhang Yan nodded and said with a serious expression, "I will do my best to protect you." Sun Huaying was very straightforward. He cupped his hands and said, "All right, my life is in your hands." Since they were going to fight with Feng Haiyang later, they naturally had to be prepared. After everyone finished their discussion, they sat down on the peak and meditated to adjust their qi. Feng Haiyang did not go far either. Just now, he had used up a lot of his mana. He hid behind a hidden cliff and recovered his mana. After half an hour, he felt that his mana had recovered. He leaped up to the sky and looked at the place where everyone was. When he saw there was no movement from within the mist for a long time, he couldn't help but feel bewildered in his heart. With a thought, he took out the sun bath mirror and shone it towards that direction. The mirror light had only just passed when it was reflected back by a ray of light, causing him to still be unable to see the exact situation of the four of them. He pondered and kept the mirror. As long as the four of them had not left, he did not have to be too anxious. He did not have to rush to deal with them. Even if he could succeed, he would still be in danger of getting injured. He might as well wait until he found the Junyang treasure pot and refined more demons. It would not be too late to fight with them then. He waited patiently for a long time. Suddenly, he sensed something in his mind. After a slight inspection, it seemed that he had found the Junyang treasure pot. He could not help but feel happy. He focused his mind and looked at it with the demon's eyes. After a while, he frowned. Although the treasure pot was the same as the one he had seen before, and it would also hide at home, he still felt that something was wrong. He suspected that it was a fake. After thinking for a while, he made a hand sign and ordered a few demons to rush forward. If the treasure pot was real, he would definitely not be able to catch it. However, when he was using the hand sign, a ray of light from a mirror suddenly shone on his body. For a moment, it was as if he was exposed to the scorching sun. He could not help but narrow his eyes and looked up. He saw 4 rays of light flying out from the clouds and heading towards him. Among them, there were 2 rays of sword light that were extremely fast. In a flash, they were not far away. Sun Huaying and Zhang Yan attacked from the left and right. Although they had a way to defeat the enemy, if they retreated, it would arouse Feng Haiyang's suspicion. In order to not expose their intentions, he rushed to the front with Zhang Yan. Feng Haiyang sneered. He did not care about anything else for the time being. He changed his hand sign and the sound of rolling waves came from below him. The water from the tribulation broke into dozens of mountains and created a huge wave that was 1,000 feet tall. It rolled towards the 2 of them. Zhang Yan and Sun Huaying instantly felt the sky above them darken, and when they raised their heads to look, they saw that they were blocked by the tribulation water from all directions. Before this monstrous wave, they seemed extremely tiny, but both of their expressions remained the same. Zhang Yanqing shouted, and a ray of watery light flashed out from the high cloud above him. With a loud crashing sound, a boundless tide also rose up, and it fearlessly welcomed the tribulation water. Feng Haiyang raised his eyebrows. After a few rounds of fighting, he knew that Zhang Yan's ray of water could subdue the devil. However, the water from the tribulation was different. It was formed from spiritual power. Even if it was swallowed, it might not be able to suppress it. In the end, it was very likely that they would end up in a battle of spiritual power. His mind raced. He felt that his spiritual power was far superior to his opponents. If he could seize this opportunity to shatter that Tao technique, it would be one less threat to him. Therefore, with a loud shout, he pushed his spiritual power to another level. At this instant, the sound of tribulation water shook the sky, and its surging momentum was ferocious to the extreme. A ray of light appeared in Zhang Yan's eyes. He channeled his spiritual power and heard a muffled sound. From within the ray of water, another ray of yellow light flew out. In an instant, it grew to 1,000 feet in size. The turbid tide crashed into it and a loud rumble was heard. It sounded like thunder. Although it was loud, it could not move the tide. He was using the true light of water as a cover and hid the true light of earth behind it. This was to trick Feng Haiyang into releasing his spiritual power to attack. This way, Feng Haiyang would be restrained and create an opportunity for the person behind him to attack. This attack did not work. Feng Haiyang was slightly surprised. Just as he was about to channel his spiritual power again, he suddenly heard a whooshing sound. He glanced over and saw a few golden dragon spears piercing through the air. They were flying towards him like arrows. He did not have time to dodge them. With a single thought, the 4 devils materialized and blocked all 4 directions. As soon as he was done, he heard clanging sounds echoing in his ears. He did not have time to look. He raised his hand and pointed upwards. From the tip of his finger, a gust of strong wind was formed. It whistled upwards and deflected a golden dragon spear that was coming at him from above. Then, he waved his sleeve. It was as if the sky and earth were flipped. The tribulation water that was more than 10 miles long suddenly swirled up. Hu Xian and Luo Qingyu had also rushed to within 10,000 feet of the tribulation water. As the tribulation water started to churn, they immediately felt the pressure increase. They both took out their protective treasures and channeled their spiritual power to stabilize themselves. However, since the tribulation water was using spiritual power to suppress others, they could not move at all. Feng Haiyang flicked his sleeves and rode the wave into the sky. He opened up his 5 fingers and made a grabbing motion downwards. A formless spell spread out and instantly enveloped everything within a radius of 8 miles. Then, he raised his fist and hammered it on his chest. With a shout, he suddenly spat out a mouthful of white light that was several feet long. Zhang Yan felt that his body was suddenly tied up. He knew that he had been captured by the trapping technique again. He looked around and saw what Feng Haiyang was doing. He reacted quickly and immediately closed his eyes. At the same time, he used his spiritual power to summon the star's sword orb. It turned into more than 20 sword rays and flew around him like meteors. He thought to himself, this person's spiritual power is stronger. He really has the upper hand. Whether he advances or retreats, it's up to him. No wonder senior brother Hu thought that he could not win against this person. Feng Haiyang flicked his finger and a thin demonic smoke was released. When it reached the ground, it turned into a big dark cloud and dispersed. Once again, it blocked everyone's vision. After casting the technique, he stamped his feet and suddenly lowered his body. In a split second, he was in front of Luo Qingyu. With a cold look on his face, he slowly lifted his sleeve and waved it in front of him. Then, a black wind that was filled with evil qi flew out, whistling. Luo Qingyu's expression turned serious. He knew how powerful this technique was. The Yang couple from Yuanyang sect were indirectly killed by this technique. If he did not try to avoid it, he would definitely die even if he had the protection of a treasure. However, if he tried to avoid it, it would only expose his weakness. Therefore, he had to choose the right time. However, he was after all one of the top 10 disciples of Qinsang school. In such a critical situation, there was no trace of panic in his eyes. He raised 2 fingers and pointed at the top of his head. The pen-shaped treasure suddenly turned upside down and spat out a puff of green smoke. Immediately, a dense fog appeared and covered his body. Only then did he try his best to activate his spiritual power and fly up into the sky. However, he had only flown a few feet high when suddenly, a pale white light flew towards him. In the blink of an eye, he was cut in half from the waist. Chapter 603. Feng Haiyang's dark axe of dark dantian could absorb the essence and blood of any cultivator it killed. However, after cutting Luo Qingyu in half, there was no benefit at all. Feng Haiyang immediately knew something was wrong. When he looked again, he saw that there was no blood coming out from the cut. Instead, there was a green color. His upper and lower body seemed to be pulled together and he looked as if nothing had happened. With a shout, he turned into a green light and flew away. This was the supernatural power of void qi of life. It could regenerate a broken body and regenerate bones and flesh. Even if one's head was chopped off, it could be reattached. Therefore, this technique consumed a lot of mana. After Luo Qingyu used it, he had no more energy to fight and could only retreat from the battle. Just as Feng Haiyang was about to give chase, a ray of sword light suddenly flew towards him. It was as fast as lightning, and there was no way for him to dodge. In just a flash, his head had already been chopped off. The sword light went back and forth, and then it was divided into more than 10 pieces. The severed body parts all fell into the water below, and suddenly disappeared without a trace. Sun Huaying used his mind's eye to stare at the water. At this moment, the outside world suddenly became silent. There was no sound and light. His mind suddenly became clear like a water mirror. The one-thought heart sword was a secret skill of the Killing Sword sect. It could sense the qi and communicate with the spirit. As long as one could locate the enemy's whereabouts, one could kill the enemy with a single thought. If Feng Haiyang wanted to show himself, he would definitely be triggered. When he showed himself again, it would be the time for him to strike with his sword. It seemed like he had waited for a long time, but in reality, it was only a short moment. The sword pill suddenly shook violently and an undetectable spiritual vigor appeared in his mind. Sun Huaying opened his eyes and his mind moved. A cold sword will that could pierce through the sky filled the whole area. At practically the exact same moment, a pool of tribulation water dispersed out of thin air 320 meters away from him, and an inaudible shrill cry sounded out from within it. As he struck with his sword, it was as if his spirit, qi, and spirit were all sucked out. His body suddenly became empty and it was difficult for him to even fly in the air. He struggled to lift his eyes and looked forward. He saw that the demonic qi of the water seemed to have lost control. It was slowly fading away. Did it work? Not only did Zhang Yan's expression not loosen up, it even became slightly solemn. That sword strike seemed to be effective, and even the heaven and earth lock technique had dissipated. However, he still felt that this great enemy was still there. At this time, his mind inexplicably jolted, and he turned around and shouted, "Fellow Taoist Sun, be careful." As soon as he finished speaking, a devil suddenly appeared beside Sun Huaying. It opened its bloody mouth and bit at him while laughing maniacally. Zhang Yan knew that he wouldn't be able to defend himself after he drew his sword. Since he had promised to protect him, he was prepared. With a flick of his finger, a drop of Xianming heavy water flew out. With a dang sound, the demon was knocked back a few steps. At the same time, he waved his sleeves and a gale rose. It swept him several miles away. Although he had gotten rid of this predicament, he still didn't dare to relax. He circulated his mana, and the cloud above his head suddenly trembled. Then, a grand water light spread out. It was like thousands of rivers and thousands of whirlpools, and it produced a boundless traction force. Even if there were treasures and devils attacking, it would still be able to slow them down. At this moment, the water spun, and Feng Haiyang's figure appeared again. He stood on the water, and his clothes fluttered in the wind. He seemed to be completely fine. He stared at Sun Huaying for a moment, and it was unknown what he was thinking. He revealed a reminiscing expression and sighed, "Taoist Sun, good sword technique." There was a reason why he was able to avoid the sword of one thought. When he fought with Ban Xiaoming from the Shaoqing sect in the past, Ban Xiaoming used this sword in the end. However, Ban Xiaoming didn't seem to be proficient in it at that time, and he couldn't control it as he pleased. Feng Haiyang was able to dodge it by luck, and he also saw some of its profundities. Thus, he was prepared in advance. If it wasn't for that, it would be hard to say the ending. Hu Xian's heart sank. At this moment, at least 2 of the 4 of them had lost their ability to fight, and it was practically impossible for them to kill this person. It seemed like they could only retreat from the Starstone. Feng Haiyang suddenly smiled. He raised his hand, and 3 devils flew out from behind him, and they flew towards Hu Xian, Zhang Yan, and Sun Huaying. After that, he tapped his foot on the ground and flew up. He transformed into a strand of yellow smoke that tore through the sky and flew straight into the clouds. The direction he was pointing at was surprisingly the direction that Luo Qingyu had retreated to earlier. When he saw that Sun Huaying had Zhang Yan's protection by her side, and that her mana couldn't recover in a short period of time, he decisively gave up the thought of killing her and turned to look for another prey. It could be said that he displayed his advantage of being able to come and go as he pleased, and he displayed his advantage of being unpredictable to the extreme. This move was very sudden, and Zhang Yan couldn't get away from it for a while. Although Hu Xian reacted to it, the opponent's underworld escaping technique was too fast, and it was not inferior to the flying sword's light. Hu Xian was also powerless, and within a breath or two, he was left far behind. At this moment, a loud noise was heard from afar. The 3 of them turned around and saw a majestic palace with jade pillars. It was obvious that Luo Qingyu had no choice but to summon the great lofty cloud palace in order to save his life. Hu Xian's expression changed. With Luo Qingyu's current mana, he definitely wouldn't be able to hold on for long, and he had no choice but to catch up and help him. As he thought of this, he turned around and said, "It's useless to stay here any longer, junior brother Zhang, fellow Taoist Sun, please leave quickly." As soon as he finished speaking, he activated his mana twice more, and transformed into a fiery golden rainbow, rushing towards them. Sun Huaying circulated her magic a few times, and regained some of her energy. She said to Zhang Yan in a serious tone, "Fellow Taoist Zhang, you don't have to worry about me, you can go and help fellow Taoist Luo, I'll leave on my own." Previously, the 4 of them had agreed that if his sword failed, they would give up on killing this person, and each of them would find a way to escape. Zhang Yan shook his head and said, "Feng Haiyang is very good at making a ruckus, if I leave, he will definitely have some tricks up his sleeves." Since fellow Taoists' mana isn't strong enough, why don't you leave first? Sun Huaying thought for a while, and nodded, all right. He took out the talisman, and silently recited the incantation. With a slight movement, the last bit of mana left in his body dissipated. Even so, he still stood straight and did not fall. He looked at Zhang Yan, and solemnly cupped his hands, and said, fellow Taoist Zhang, thanks to your protection, I'm still alive. If there's anything in the future, you can come to Shaoqing to look for me. Zhang Yan nodded, and raised his hands to return the gesture. At this moment, the talisman trembled, and a brilliant brilliance enveloped Sun Huaying. Then, a pillar of golden light shot up, and instantly flew into the sky, disappearing without a trace. Huxian rushed to a mile away from the cloud tower, and he looked around. Feng Haiyang was nowhere to be seen, but layers of tribulation water surrounded him, crashing against the cloud tower's restriction. Seeing that the situation was urgent, he didn't take a closer look. He shook his body, and two clouds appeared above his head. One was lightning fire, and the other was metal wind. At the same time, they landed, blasting apart a portion of the tribulation water, and he charged into the inner circle. The demons sensed the spiritual qi of a living person's flesh and blood. They were like flies that smelled blood, and they swarmed out of the tribulation water, gathering toward Huxian. Huxian's gaze shifted, and he understood. No matter how high his cultivation was, he wouldn't be able to last long under the siege of the seemingly endless demons. He was about to die here. His expression was as calm as ever as he raised his hand, summoning the 9 great sun dragon sparrow spears into the air. He then pointed a finger forward, and the 9 spears shot forth in quick succession, creating mountain-shattering sounds as they tore through all obstacles in their path. For a moment, nothing could stop him. Using the power of the talisman, he quickly reached the bottom of the cloud tower, and shouted, Junior brother Luo. As if he heard the shout. Once the restriction door opened, he shook his body, and entered it. He saw Luo Qingyu sitting in the middle of the hall, his head full of sweat, and he was on the verge of collapsing. He took a few steps forward, took the talisman, and infused his mana into it, and said in a deep voice, Junior brother Luo, quickly take out the talisman, I will take care of the cloud tower for you. Luo Qingyu knew that with his exhausted body, even if he stayed, he would only be a burden to the others. He reached out to take out the talisman, but he seemed to have thought of something, and he stopped, and said, if I leave, how will you leave? The tribulation water was everywhere, and even if he could leave, Huxian would not be able to escape without help. Huxian said, it's okay, I have a way to escape, don't worry, junior brother. Now, the longer he delayed, the more mana Huxian would use, so Luo Qingyu did not say anything more, and quickly took out the talisman, held it in his palm, and chanted a spell. Then, he shook the talisman lightly, and the talisman floated in the air. After about 10 breaths, the talisman unfolded, and a golden light wrapped around his body, and with a loud bang, he flew out of the opened door. Huxian waited for him to leave, and then shook the talisman, and the towering cloud tower turned into a clear light, and entered his sleeve. Without the talisman as a shield, the tribulation water and the demons all rushed in, and the whistling sound was loud, covering the sky. He took a deep breath and stood firmly on the cloud. He raised his hand and formed a spell. After a short while, he heard the sound of a drum and a stone pillar flew out from the cloud. With a loud rumble, it grew to a height of 1,000 feet before it stopped. Countless strange talismans appeared on the pillar and golden rays of lightning flashed. It protected the area within a radius of a mile. Although the tribulation water continued to press in, it wouldn't be able to hold it for long. However, it would be enough for him to escape. He took out the talisman from his sleeve, and chanted a spell. Suddenly, he felt his body empty, and his mana was gone, and the talisman was already floating. At this moment, there was a sudden violent vibration, and he could not help but tremble. He looked straight ahead, and saw that the tribulation water had suddenly increased in momentum, and like a collapsing river, it was rushing in fiercely, and the speed at which it was pressing in was more than twice as fast. In just a few breaths, it was already within 100 feet of him. Hu Xian's expression was solemn, and his body was as steady as a rock, and he did not show any signs of panic. Just when the tribulation water was about to hit the tip of his nose, the talisman suddenly shone brightly, and with a loud bang, it wrapped around him, broke through the turbid waves, and flew into the sky. More than 10 miles away, on top of a towering cliff, Zhang Yan raised his head and looked at the golden light flying away. In the blink of an eye, the 3 people had left, and he was the only one left in the Star Stone. He had gained a lot this time, and if he left now, he would not lose anything, but he decided to stay. Although it was rare to achieve the nascent soul in 100 years, but under the 3 great tribulations, anyone who was careless would be turned into powder. Only by competing step by step and grabbing all the fated chances could he have a chance to break free from the shackles and transcend the mortal world. The Star Stone here could save him dozens of years of cultivation, so he could not miss it. Anyone who stood in his way was his enemy. Other than Tai Han Grand Ancestor and Shenlin too, Feng Haiyang was the strongest opponent he had ever met in his life. With his strength alone, he was not confident that he could defeat Feng Haiyang, so he could only fight with his life on the line. Zhang Yan took out the Junyang pot, threw it to the top of the mountain, and shouted, "Feng Haiyang, the Junyang pot is here, do you dare to come and take it?" His voice rumbled, and it shook the wilderness, echoing endlessly. After a while, a black shadow suddenly appeared in the sky, and it was a huge tide that was more than 10 miles long, and the sound was earth-shattering. It was rushing towards him. Zhang Yan raised his head and let out a long roar. He took a step forward, and with a rumbling sound, the entire starstone trembled as his foot landed. In an instant, he had stepped into the 4th stage of the strength path. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.